I woke up from a 3-week coma, unable to move a single muscle, and heard my son laughing with his wife right beside my bed. "Don't worry, babe. The doctor says he is a vegetable. Once he kicks the bucket, we dump the old lady in a state nursing home and the mansion is ours." Tears ran down my face, but I did not make a sound. I closed my eyes and waited. 3 days later, they came to pull the plug, but the bed was empty. I had already liquidated everything. Abandoned by the wolves I raised, I took my wife and vanished, leaving them nothing but a mountain of debt and a shocking video message playing on the hospital TV. Before I tell you how I executed the perfect disappearance, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own soul. My name is Raymond Coleman, but everybody calls me Ray. I am 73 years old, and for 40 years I was a structural engineer. I built bridges that span the widest rivers in Virginia, and I laid the foundations for skyscrapers that touch the clouds. I know everything there is to know about stress loads and fracture points. I know that if you put too much weight on a beam that has a hidden crack, it does not just bend, it snaps. But lying in that hospital bed in the intensive care unit, I realized that the biggest crack in my foundation was not in the concrete I poured, but in the bloodline I created. Darkness. That is all I remember for a long time. It was a heavy, suffocating darkness, like being buried under 10 feet of wet cement. Then there was a sound, a rhythmic beeping. Beep, beep, beep. It was annoying and persistent. I tried to lift my hand to turn off the alarm, but my hand did not move. I tried to open my eyes, but my eyelids felt like they were welded shut. Panic started to rise in my chest. I tried to scream. I tried to shout for my wife Clara, but no sound came out. My throat was full of tubes. My body was a stone statue, and I was trapped inside it. Locked-in syndrome. That is what they call it. Your brain wakes up, but your body stays asleep. You can hear, you can feel, you can see if your eyes happen to open, but you cannot move. You are a ghost haunting your own skin. I heard the hiss of the pneumatic door opening. I waited for the smell of Clara's lavender perfume. She always wore lavender. It was the scent of home, but instead I smelled something sharp and chemical. Expensive designer perfume mixed with the stale odor of cigarette smoke. "It smells like death in here," a female voice said. It was sharp and nasally. I knew that voice. It belonged to Paige, my daughter-in-law. She was a woman who called herself a life coach, but the only life she was interested in coaching was one financed by my bank account. "Lower your voice," Paige, a male voice, replied. It was Julian. My son, my only child. The boy I had taught to throw a baseball. The man whose college tuition I had paid for by working double shifts on construction sites in the freezing rain. "He cannot hear us," Julian said. "Look at him. He is out cold. The machines are the only thing keeping him going." I felt a hand touch my arm. It was not a gentle touch. It was a prod, like someone checking a melon at the grocery store to see if it was rotten. "He looks terrible," Paige said. "How long is this going to take, Julian? We have been waiting for 3 weeks. The open house for that penthouse in Arlington is on Sunday. We need the deposit money." I felt a surge of rage so hot it almost burned through the paralysis. I was lying there fighting for my life, and they were talking about real estate. They were talking about spending my money before my body was even cold. I focused all my energy on my eyes. "Open," I commanded. "Open, damn it." Slowly, agonizingly, my eyelids fluttered. The harsh, fluorescent light of the hospital room flooded in, blinding me for a second. When my vision cleared, I saw them. Julian was wearing a suit that was too tight for him, checking his watch with an impatient scowl. He looked tired, but not the kind of tired that comes from grief. It was the tiredness of inconvenience. Paige was standing next to him, scrolling through her phone. She was wearing a bright red dress. Who wears a red cocktail dress to visit a dying man? They did not see that my eyes were open. They were too busy looking at the monitor. The doctor walked in. I could see him from the corner of my eye. Dr. Evans, a good man. He checked my vitals. "Any change?" Dr. Julian asked. His voice sounded hopeful, but not for my recovery. Dr. Evans sighed. "I am afraid not, Mr. Coleman. The stroke was massive. There is minimal brain activity on the scans. He is in a persistent vegetative state. He is not suffering, but he is not really here either." Julian nodded slowly. He put a hand on his chin, pretending to contemplate the medical tragedy. "So, what are the options?" he asked. "We can keep him on life support," Dr. Evans said, "but the quality of life is non-existent. Or if you decide that it is time, We can remove the tubes and let nature take its course. I wanted to scream. I wanted to sit up and grab Julian by the lapels of his expensive jacket. I am right here. I wanted to yell. I can hear you. But I was frozen. I was a prisoner. We need to think about it, Julian said solemnly. It is a hard decision. Dr. Evans nodded respectfully and left the room. As soon as the door clicked shut, the performance ended. Julian dropped the sad son act instantly. He turned to Paige and grinned. A wide, predatory grin that made my stomach turn. "Did you hear that, babe?" he said. "Persistent vegetative state. That means he is gone. The old man is finally checked out." Paige put her phone away and clapped her hands together quietly. Finally, she whispered, "So, we can pull the plug." "When?" "Today." "Not today," Julian said, pacing around the bed. "We have to make it look good. We wait a couple of days, we play the grieving family, then we tell the doctors we don't want him to suffer anymore. We do the compassionate thing." He laughed. It was a dry, hollow sound. Compassionate. I lay there listening to my murder being planned. But then they said something that made the fear for my own life vanish and replaced it with a cold, terrified dread for someone else. "What about Clara?" Paige asked. She looked at the empty chair in the corner where my wife usually sat. My Clara. My sweet Clara. She had been diagnosed with early onset dementia 2 years ago. She was confused sometimes. She forgot names, but she was still the love of my life. I had promised to protect her. I was her anchor. Without me, she would drift away. "What about her?" Julian asked dismissively. "She is going to be a problem," Paige said. "She is already calling me 10 times a day asking where Ray is. She is annoying, Julian. And she is expensive. That memory care facility you looked at costs $6,000 a month. If we pay for that, we can't afford the penthouse payments." I stopped breathing. The ventilator hissed, pushing air into my lungs because my body forgot how to do it on its own. Julian walked over to the window and looked out. "We are not sending her to that private facility," he said. "That is a waste of the inheritance." "Then what?" Paige asked. "Shady Acres," Julian said. Shady Acres. I knew that place. It was a state-funded warehouse for the indigent on the south side of the city. It had been on the news last year for health code violations. Bed bugs, mold, staff shortages. It was a place where people went to rot. "No," I screamed inside my head. "No, not Clara. She is your mother, Julian. She wiped your nose. She made your lunch. She loved you when you were unlovable." "Shady Acres is free," Julian continued, "or close to it. Once Dad is gone, we get power of attorney over Mom. We declare her incompetent. We dump her at Shady Acres and tell her it is a spa. She won't know the difference. She barely knows what day it is." Paige smiled. She walked over to Julian and kissed him on the cheek. "You are a genius, babe," she said. "So the house, the accounts, the life insurance, it is all ours." "All ours," Julian said. "All we have to do is wait for his heart to stop." They walked back to my bedside. They stood over me, looking down like 2 vultures inspecting a carcass. Julian leaned in close. He smelled of scotch. He had been drinking. At 10 in the morning. "Goodbye, Dad," he whispered. "Thanks for the money. Sorry you won't be around to see us enjoy it." He patted my cheek. It was a condescending tap. That was the moment something broke inside me. It wasn't a bone. It was the dam holding back 50 years of love and forgiveness. I had excused Julian's behavior for decades. I had bailed him out of debt. I had bought him cars. I had blamed myself for his failures, thinking I worked too much. But this was evil. I focused every ounce of willpower I had left. I screamed silently at my own body, "Move! Do something! Show them you are not dead!" I felt a twitch. A tiny spark of electricity in my left eye. A single tear, hot and heavy, rolled out of the corner of my eye. It slid down my temple and pooled in my ear. Paige saw it. She gasped. "Julian, look," she said, pointing. "He is crying." Julian looked down. He saw the tear track on my dark skin. He paused for a second. For a brief heartbeat, I saw a flash of fear in his eyes. He leaned closer, peering into my pupils. "Can he hear us?" Paige asked, her voice trembling slightly. Julian stared at me. I tried to blink. I tried to glare at him with all the fury of a father scorned. But my eyes remained fixed, staring at the ceiling tiles. Julian straightened up. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a handkerchief. He wiped the tear from my face. He wiped it away like it was a smudge of dirt on a shoe. "No," he said coldly. "It is just a reflex. The nerves are firing off as the brain shuts down, like a chicken running around with its head cut off. He crumpled the handkerchief and shoved it back in his pocket. He is gone, Paige. There is nobody in there. It is just meat and electricity. He grabbed her hand. Come on, let's go get some lunch. I am starving. All this waiting is making me hungry. They turned and walked out of the room. I heard Paige giggling as they walked down the hallway. The door hissed shut. I was alone again with the beep, beep, beep of the monitor. But I wasn't the same man I was 10 minutes ago. Ray Coleman, the bridge builder, was dead. Ray Coleman, the Avenger, was born. Just a reflex. That is what he called my grief. Just meat and electricity. I lay there in the silence and I made a vow. I swore on the Bible my mother gave me that I would not die in this bed. I would not let them touch a hair on Clara's head. I would wake up. I would walk out of here. And I would bring the whole world crashing down on top of them. I am a structural engineer. I know how to build things up, but I also know exactly where to place the dynamite to bring them down. Julian thought I was a vegetable. He was about to find out that I was the one thing he never expected. I was the demolition man, and the countdown had just begun. The silence in a hospital room is never truly silent. It is a symphony of mechanical noises that remind you that you are alive only because a machine says so. Beep, beep, whoosh. Beep, beep, whoosh. For hours after Julian and Paige left, I lay there listening to that rhythm and letting the rage boil in my blood. They say anger is a poison, but in that moment, anger was the fuel I needed. It was the electricity jump starting a battery that had died. Julian thought I was just meat and electricity. He was right about the electricity. But he forgot that electricity can start a fire. I focused all my attention on my right hand. It felt heavy, like it was made of lead and encased in concrete. I visualized the nerves running from my brain down my spine through my shoulder and into my fingertips. I am an engineer. I know how to trace a line. I know how to find the break in the circuit. I pushed with my mind. I screamed internally, move, just move 1 inch. And then it happened. My index finger twitched. It was tiny, a movement so small that if you blinked, you would miss it. But to me, it felt like I had just lifted a skyscraper. I did it again. Twitch. Then I tried the middle finger. Twitch. The connection was there. The bridge was not collapsed, it was just damaged. I could rebuild it. My first instinct was to thrash, to ring the nurse call button, to summon Dr. Evans and tell him that I was in here, that I was awake, and that my son was planning a murder. I wanted to roar, but then I stopped. I remembered Julian's voice. We wait a couple of days. We play the grieving family. If I woke up now, what would happen? Julian would put on his mask. He would pretend to be the relieved son. He would cry tears of joy. And then he would take me home. He would have power of attorney over my recovery. He would control who visited me. He would control my medication. He could crush pills into my soup just as easily at home as he could in a hospital. Maybe easier. No. Waking up was dangerous. Staying asleep was power. As long as they thought I was a vegetable, they would be careless. They would talk. They would plan. And I would be the spy behind enemy lines, gathering the ammunition I needed to destroy them. So I made the hardest decision of my life. I decided to remain a statue. I relaxed my finger. I let my face go slack. I slowed my breathing to match the rhythm of the ventilator. I became the actor in a play where the audience wants me dead. The door opened again about an hour later. I braced myself for the smell of stale cigarettes and expensive perfume. I braced myself for another round of cruelty from Paige. But this time the air shifted. A soft scent drifted over me, lavender and old paper. It was a smell that had comforted me for 45 years. Clara. I heard the shuffle of her orthopedic shoes on the linoleum floor. She walked slowly. I could hear her breathing a little heavy. My poor Clara. She was 70 years old, and her mind was like a library where the books were constantly being rearranged by a mischievous ghost. Some days she was sharp as a tack. Other days she thought we were still living in our first apartment in 1980. I felt the mattress dip as she sat down in the chair right next to my head. I waited for her to speak. "Ray," she whispered. Her voice was trembling. It sounded thin and fragile like dried leaves. "Ray, are you there? The bad lady said you were sleeping. She said you might not wake up." The bad lady. That was Paige. Even through the fog of dementia, Clara knew. Animals and children always know who the predators are. I felt her hand cover mine. Her skin was paper thin and cold. She was shaking. "Please wake up, Ray," she said. "I don't like it at the house anymore. It is scary." I lay perfectly still, but my heart was hammering against my ribs. What were they doing to her? She squeezed my hand. It was a desperate grip. They took the piano, Ray, she said. The piano. The baby grand Steinway I had bought her for our 30th anniversary. She didn't play much anymore because her arthritis was bad, but she loved that piano. She polished it every day. It was the heart of our living room. 2 men came with a truck. She continued, her voice catching in her throat. The bad lady pointed at it, and they took it away. I told them no. I told them Ray would be mad. But she just laughed. She said we needed the space for a yoga mat. Ray, what is a yoga mat? Why is it more important than my piano? I felt a tear drop onto my hand. It was hot, and they locked me in the room, Ray. Yesterday. I wanted to go to the kitchen to get some tea, but the door wouldn't open. I knocked and knocked. I heard Julian outside. I heard him say, "Leave her in there, Paige. I don't want her wandering around while the appraiser is here." My blood ran cold. They locked her in. They locked my wife in a bedroom like a disobedient dog so they could appraise my furniture. This wasn't just greed anymore. This was abuse. This was a crime. I was hungry. Ray. Clara sobbed quietly. I was so thirsty. I had to drink water from the bathroom sink. It tasted like rust. Please, Ray, you have to come home. You have to make them stop. They are selling everything. They took your tools. They took the picture of Mia. They said I have to go away soon. She leaned closer to my ear. They said I am going to a place called Shady Acres. Julian said it is a nice hotel, but he is lying, Ray. I know when he is lying. He pulls his earlobe. He pulled his earlobe when he said it. I don't want to go to a hotel. I want to stay in our house. Please, Ray, open your eyes. She buried her face in my shoulder and wept. Her body shook with the force of her fear. I couldn't do it anymore. Strategy be damned. Safety be damned. My wife was terrified. She was suffering. And I was lying there playing possum. I am a man who built bridges to withstand hurricanes. I am not a man who lets his wife drink tap water in a locked room while thieves loot his home. I needed to tell her. I needed her to know she wasn't alone. But I couldn't speak. The tube was still in my throat. I couldn't shout. I had to use our code. 40 years ago, when we were young and I was working long shifts on site, I would come home exhausted, too tired to speak. We developed a signal, 3 squeezes of the hand, 1, 2, 3. It meant I love you. It meant I am here. It meant we are together. I gathered every ounce of strength I had. I pulled energy from my anger, from my love, from the very marrow of my bones. I focused it all into my right hand. I squeezed her fingers. 1. Clara stopped crying. She froze. She lifted her head. She looked at my hand. I waited a second. I needed to recover my strength. 2. Clara gasped. She sat up straight. She wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. She stared at my face. "Ray," she whispered. 3. It was weak. It was barely a flutter. But it was there. The 3rd squeeze. The promise. Clara let out a sound that was half laugh, half sob. "You are awake," she said. "Oh God, Ray, you are awake." She started to stand up. She opened her mouth to yell for the doctor. I knew I had to stop her. If she yelled, if she alerted the staff, Julian would find out. And if Julian found out, the game was over. I opened my eyes. It was a struggle. The lids felt like they were glued shut, but I forced them open. I looked straight at her. Her face was lined with worry. Her gray hair was messy, and her cardigan was buttoned wrong. But to me, she was the most beautiful thing in the world. "Ray," she cried, reaching for my face. "I will get the nurse. I will tell them." I squeezed her hand again, hard, a sharp warning squeeze. She stopped. She looked into my eyes. I stared at her. I didn't blink. I widened my eyes slightly, then narrowed them. I moved my eyes to the door, then back to her. Then I closed them and opened them again slowly. Silence. I tried to project the word into her mind. "Silence, Clara. Be quiet." Clara looked at me. She looked at the door. Confusion clouded her eyes for a moment. The dementia was trying to pull her back into the fog. She looked scared. "Why?" she whispered. "Why can't I tell them?" I squeezed her hand 3 times again. "Trust me." Then I moved my index finger to my lips. I couldn't lift my arm, but I could move the finger against the bedsheet, scratching the fabric. Shh. Clara watched my finger, she watched my eyes, and then I saw it happen. I saw the fog lift. I saw the woman I married, the woman who raised a child, the woman who managed our household finances for 30 years surface from beneath the illness. Her spine straightened, her jaw set. She understood. She looked at the door. She looked back at me. She leaned in close, her voice barely a breath. "It is Julian, isn't it?" she whispered. "And that woman. They are dangerous." I blinked once. "Yes." "We have to be careful," she said. I blinked again. "Yes." She took a deep breath. She reached into her purse and pulled out a comb. She started combing her hair. She buttoned her cardigan correctly. She wiped the tears from her face. "Okay, Ray," she said. Her voice was stronger now. It sounded like the Clara of 10 years ago. "Okay, I won't tell them. It is our secret. Just like when we hid the Christmas presents from Julian." She held my hand tightly. "What do we do, Ray?" she asked. I couldn't answer, but I could look at her with all the love and determination I felt. I looked at her purse. I looked at her phone, which was sticking out of the pocket. She followed my gaze. "You need help," she said. I blinked. You need Solomon," she guessed. Solomon was our lawyer, my old friend, the only man I trusted with my life besides her. I blinked 3 times fast. "Yes, yes, yes." Clara nodded. A fierce determination lit up her eyes. "I will call him," she said. "I have to be sneaky." Paige took my cell phone, but I hid an old one in my knitting bag. "She thinks I am stupid, Ray. She thinks I am just a crazy old lady." She smoothed the blanket over my chest. "I will show her crazy," she whispered. She kissed my forehead. Her lips were warm. "You rest, Ray," she said. "You get strong. Don't you dare move a muscle when they come back. You play dead. I will play the fool, and we will catch them." She stood up. She looked at the door one last time, then back at me. "I love you too," she said. She squeezed my hand 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Then she shuffled toward the door. As she reached for the handle, she hunched her shoulders. She messed up her hair a little bit. She let her face go slack and confused. She transformed herself back into the fragile, senile woman the world expected to see. She opened the door, and I heard her voice drift into the hallway, loud and wavering. "Nurse, nurse, where's the bathroom? I think I am lost again." I closed my eyes. Darkness returned, but it wasn't the scary darkness anymore. It was the darkness of a bunker before the counterattack. I wasn't alone. I had an ally, and not just any ally. I had Clara. They thought her mind was broken, but they forgot that the heart remembers what the mind forgets. They had made the mistake of threatening her nest, and a mother bird, even an old one, will fight to the death to protect her own. I lay there listening to the beep, beep, beep of the monitor. It didn't sound like a countdown to death anymore. It sounded like a ticking bomb, and Julian was sitting right on top of it. The devil wears Prada, but in my case he wore a Brooks Brothers suit and carried a leather briefcase that cost more than my first car. 2 hours after Clara left the room, the door opened again. It was Julian, but this time he brought backup. The man with him looked like a shark that had learned to walk upright. He had slicked back gray hair and eyes that assessed the value of everything they touched, including me. "This is Mr. Thorne," Julian said, closing the door. "He is the family attorney. Well, my attorney." Mr. Thorne walked up to the bed. He did not say hello. He did not check the chart. He leaned over and waved a hand in front of my face like he was checking to see if a lamp was plugged in. "Completely unresponsive," Thorne said. His voice was dry like sandpaper rubbing against stone. "Totally," Julian said. "The doctors say the lights are on, but nobody is home. It is a tragedy, really." Thorne opened his briefcase on the rolling table that was supposed to hold my lunch. He pulled out a stack of documents thick enough to choke a horse. "It is a tragedy for him," Thorne said, flipping through the pages. "But an opportunity for you, since he is incapacitated and your mother is, well, let's call it mentally compromised. We can file for emergency guardianship ex parte. That means we don't need a hearing. We just need the doctor's affidavit, which we have, and a judge's signature." Julian picked up a document. His hands were shaking slightly, not from grief, but from excitement. "And this gives me control of everything," he asked. "Everything," Thorne confirmed. the bank accounts, the investment portfolio, the real estate, and most importantly, the medical decisions. Once the judge signs this tomorrow morning, you become the legal decision maker for Raymond Coleman. You can decide where he lives, what treatment he gets, and when to stop that treatment. When to stop. They were talking about killing me legally. Julian smiled. It was a tight, nervous smile. And Mom, he asked. You become her guardian too, Thorne said. You can admit her to any facility you deem appropriate for her safety. If Shady Acres is the most cost-effective option, that is your call to make. Shady Acres. The death camp. I lay there listening to the scratching of a pen on paper. Julian was signing the petition. He was signing away my life and my wife's freedom. Every scratch of the pen felt like a knife cutting into my skin. I wanted to roar. I wanted to sit up and strangle them both with my bare hands. But I remembered Clara's face. I remembered the plan. Play dead. Excellent, Thorne said, snapping the briefcase shut. I will file this first thing in the morning. By 10 o'clock tomorrow, you will be the king of the castle, Julian. They left the room laughing about a golf game they were planning for the weekend. I was alone again. But now I had a deadline. 10 o'clock tomorrow. That was when the hammer would drop. I had less than 12 hours to save 50 years of building a life. I stared at the clock on the wall. The second hand moved with agonizing slowness. Tick, tick, tick. Around 7 in the evening, the shift changed. The nurses who smelled like smoke and indifference left. And then the door opened and an angel walked in. She wasn't wearing wings. She was wearing blue scrubs and comfortable sneakers. She was a big woman with skin the color of mahogany and hands that looked like they had held up the world a few times. Hattie. I recognized her instantly. Hattie had been a nurse at this hospital for 30 years, but more importantly, she was a member of my church. I had fixed her roof for free after a hurricane 10 years ago. She had brought a sweet potato pie to my house every Christmas since. She walked in humming a gospel tune, His Eye is on the Sparrow. She checked the monitors. She adjusted my pillow. Her touch was gentle. It was the touch of someone who saw a human being, not a vegetable. Well, Mr. Ray, she said softly. You got yourself in a mess, didn't you? She dipped a sponge in water and dabbed my dry lips. Don't you worry, she said. I am going to take good care of you tonight. I remember when you fixed my roof. You didn't charge me a dime. You said neighbors look out for neighbors, Hattie. I never forgot that. She turned to check the IV bag. Her back was to me. This was it, the Hail Mary pass. I knew Hattie. I knew she was a woman of God. But I also knew she was no fool. She knew a snake when she saw one. If I could just reach her. I summoned the energy again. The bridge I had rebuilt in my mind earlier was stronger now. I pushed the signal down my arm. I reached out and grabbed the edge of her scrub top. It was a weak grip, just a tug. But Hattie stopped humming. She froze. She turned around slowly. She looked at my hand, clutching her shirt. Mr. Ray, she whispered. I opened my eyes. Hattie gasped. She dropped the sponge. Lord have mercy, she said. You are awake. She reached for the call button. Doctor, I need a... I pulled her shirt again. Harder this time. I shook my head. A tiny movement side to side. No. Hattie stopped. She looked at my face. She saw the terror in my eyes. She saw the urgency. Don't call the doctor, she asked. I blinked once. She looked at the door, then back at me. She lowered her hand from the alarm. She leaned in close. Mr. Ray, why don't you want the doctor? Your son was just here. He thinks you are in a coma. I tried to speak. My throat was dry and the tube was gone, but my voice was a rusty gate that hadn't been opened in weeks. I made a croaking sound. Pen. I rasped. Hattie's eyes went wide. She understood. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a pen. She grabbed the clipboard from the end of the bed and flipped it over to the blank side. Here, she said, putting the pen in my hand. My fingers felt like sausages. I couldn't grip it properly. It slipped. I tried again. I clamped my fist around it like a child holding a crayon. Hattie held the clipboard steady. I wrote. The letters were jagged and ugly. They looked like lightning strikes. H-E-L-P. Hattie read it out loud. Help. I took a breath. I wrote again. S-O-N-T-R-Y-I-N-G Tokillme. Hattie put a hand over her mouth. Jesus save us, she whispered. I wasn't done. I had to tell her the most important part. Saveclara. I dropped the pen. My hand fell to the mattress exhausted. I looked up at Hattie. I pleaded with her with my eyes. I needed her to believe me. I needed her to choose a side. Hattie looked at the paper. Then she looked at me. She saw the fear. She saw the truth. She remembered the roof. She remembered the man I was. She walked to the door and locked it. Click. She came back to the bed. Her face was grim. I knew there was something wrong with that boy, she said. He walked in here looking at his watch like he was waiting for a bus, not watching his father die. And that wife of his. She shook her head. What do you need me to do, Mr. Ray? I pointed to her pocket. To her cell phone. Phone, I whispered. Solomon Weiss. My lawyer. The only man who could stop a legal steamroller. Hattie knew him. Everyone in the neighborhood knew Solomon. He was the kind of lawyer who worked out of a strip mall but could outsmart the fancy firms downtown. Hattie pulled out her phone. I have his number, she said. He did my will last year. She dialed. She put it on speakerphone and held it to my ear. It rang 4 times. Hello, a gruff voice answered. Hattie, is everything okay? It is 10 o'clock at night. Solomon, I croaked. There was silence on the other end. Then a sharp intake of breath. Ray, is that Ray Coleman? It is me, Solomon. But they told me you were gone. Ray, Julian called me 3 days ago. He said you were a vegetable. He asked for the copies of the trust. Lies, I said. Every word cost me energy, but I pushed them out. Julian, trying to bury me. Tomorrow morning, guardianship. He is taking everything. Clara, Shady Acres. I heard the sound of a chair scraping against a floor. Solomon had stood up. The son of a bitch, Solomon muttered. I knew he was slippery, but I didn't think he was a monster. Ray, listen to me. If he gets that guardianship tomorrow, we are in trouble. Unwinding it takes months. We don't have months. I know, I said. Need out. Tonight. Tonight, Solomon asked. Ray, you are in the ICU. You can't just walk out. I looked at Hattie. She nodded. I can get him to the loading dock, she said into the phone. Shift changes at midnight. Security is light. But I need a vehicle, an ambulance. We can't put him in a taxi. I can handle that, Solomon said. His voice was crisp now, fully in lawyer mode. I have a client who runs a private transport service, no questions asked. But Ray, where are we going? We can't go to your house. Julian has keys. Not the house I said. The safe house. Solomon paused. The beach condo. No, I said. Too obvious. The cabin. West Virginia. Nobody knew about the cabin. Not Julian. Not Paige. I had bought it 5 years ago under a shell company as a surprise for Clara's 75th birthday. It was off the grid. Solar power. Well water. It was a fortress disguised as a log home. Smart, Solomon said. Very smart. Okay, listen to me, Hattie. This is not medical advice. This is a jailbreak. If you get caught, you lose your license. I don't care about a license, Hattie said, fixing her cap. I care about what is right, and I am not letting that boy kill this man. Good woman, Solomon said. Okay, midnight. The service entrance. Look for a white van with Miller Medical Transport on the side. The driver's name is Sal, and Ray Solomon added, his voice softening. Hang in there, you stubborn old mule. We are coming for you. The line went dead. Hattie put the phone away. She looked at me. You heard the man, she said. We have 2 hours. We need to get these tubes out. We need to get you dressed. And Mr. Ray. She smiled a sad, knowing smile. You are going to have to act like you are dead one last time. Because to get you out of here, I have to put you on a gurney under a sheet. We are going to the morgue exit. I nodded. Do it, I whispered. She went to work. She moved with efficiency and grace. She disconnected the monitors but left the wires tangled so it looked like a malfunction. She removed the IV. It stung, but I didn't flinch. She found my clothes in the closet where Paige had shoved them in a plastic bag. My work boots, my flannel shirt. As she dressed me, lifting my heavy limbs like I was a doll, she talked to me. You know, Mr. Ray, she said. My mama always said that you can't bury a good man because the earth will spit him back up. Julian dug a grave for you. But he forgot to check if you were actually dead. She buttoned my shirt. Now let's go get your wife, she said. My heart leaped. Clara, we can't leave her, Hattie continued. If we leave her, he will use her as bait. We have to swing by the house. It is risky, but we have no choice. The house, the lion's den. I looked at Hattie and nodded. She was right. We leave no man behind, especially not the woman who held my hand when I had nothing. Hattie pulled a sheet over my face. The world went white. Hold your breath when we pass the security desk, she whispered. I felt the gurney start to move. The wheels rattled on the floor. I was moving. I was escaping. I was coming for you, Julian, and I was bringing hell with me. The needle coming out of my arm felt like a bee sting, but the freedom felt like a sledgehammer breaking a chain. I sat up on the edge of the hospital bed and the room spun. My head felt like it was floating 3 feet above my neck, and my legs were 2 columns of wet sand. 3 weeks in a coma does things to a man. It eats your muscle. It steals your balance. But it cannot touch your will. Not if you are built the way I am built. Hattie stood by the door keeping watch. She turned back and saw me swaying. She rushed over her rubber-soled shoes silent on the linoleum. Easy, Mr. Ray, she whispered, gripping my elbow with a hand that felt as strong as a vice grip. You take your time. Gravity is a mean thing when you haven't fought it in a while. I took a deep breath. The air smelled of antiseptic and danger. We don't have time, Hattie, I rasped. My voice sounded like gravel grinding in a mixer. I slid my feet into my work boots. They felt heavy, strange, like I was wearing concrete blocks. But as soon as I tied the laces, as soon as I felt the leather tighten around my ankles, I felt a surge of power. These were the boots I wore to pour the foundation of the First National Bank. These were the boots I wore when I rebuilt the bridge over the Potomac. They were part of me. Hattie helped me stand. My knees buckled and I gritted my teeth, forcing my quads to lock. I am a structural engineer. I know about load bearing. I forced my skeleton to hold the weight. Get the chair, I said. Hattie pulled the wheelchair over. I collapsed into it, sweating like I had just run a marathon. She didn't waste a second. She grabbed a white sheet from the linen cart. Cover up, she said. You are officially a John Doe headed for the basement. She threw the sheet over my head. The world went white and muffled. I was hidden. I was a ghost. I felt the chair start to move. We rolled out of the room. I held my breath. I heard voices in the hallway, nurses laughing, the squeak of a cart, the ding of the elevator. Good evening, Hattie, a male voice said. Security guard. Evening, Earl, Hattie replied, her voice calm and cheerful. Just taking a transport down. Rough night, Earl asked. You know how it is, Hattie said. Full moon brings out the crazy. The elevator doors opened. We rolled in. The descent was fast. My stomach dropped. I was leaving the place where my son had planned my murder. I was leaving the place where I was supposed to die. When the doors opened again, the air was colder, damp. We were in the basement. Hattie rolled me fast now. I could hear her breathing hard. We reached the loading dock. The automatic doors hissed open, and the humid Virginia night air hit me through the sheet. It smelled of exhaust and rain. Hattie pulled the sheet off. There, she said, pointing to a white van idling by the dumpster. A man jumped out of the driver's seat. He was short, thick-set, and looked like he had been in a few bar fights. Sal. You the package, Sal asked, looking me up and down. I am the package, I said. Sal didn't ask questions. He helped Hattie lift me into the back of the van. It wasn't an ambulance. It was a cargo van retrofitted with a bench. Solomon paid me in cash, Sal said, slamming the door. Said you need to make a pit stop before we head to the hills. The house, I said. Sal nodded and jumped in the front. Hattie stood by the open window. She looked at me, her eyes wet. You take care of that wife of yours, Mr. Ray, she said. And don't you worry about Julian. I will tell the morning shift I checked on you at 5 a.m. and you were sleeping like a baby. That gives you a 5-hour head start. I reached out and took her hand. I will fix your roof again, Hattie, I said. When this is over, I will put on a whole new roof. Slate this time. She smiled and slapped the side of the van. Go on now. Get. The van peeled out of the parking lot. I sat in the dark holding onto the safety handle, watching the streetlights flash by. Every light was a memory. That was the park where I taught Julian to ride a bike. That was the diner where I met Clara. That was the school where Mia played soccer, my city, my life, and I was fleeing it like a criminal. We reached my neighborhood 20 minutes later. It was a gated community, the kind of place where the lawns are manicured with nail scissors and the neighbors spy on you through lace curtains. "Kill the lights," I told Sal. He turned off the headlights and we coasted up the street. My house was at the end of the cul-de-sac. It was a monster, 6,000 square feet of brick and stone. I built it for Clara. She wanted a castle, so I gave her one. Now it looked like a prison. There were lights on in the living room. "Park down the street," I whispered. Sal stopped the van. "You want me to come in?" he asked. "No," I said. "If things go wrong, I don't want you involved." "Wait here. If I am not back in 20 minutes, you leave." I opened the door and stepped out. My legs were shaking, but the adrenaline was pumping now. I moved through the shadows of the neighbors' hedges. I knew every inch of this property. I knew which sprinkler head stuck up too high. I knew where the loose stones were on the path. I circled around to the back, the kitchen entrance. I reached under the third flower pot to the left of the door. My fingers brushed against a fake rock. I flipped it over. The key was there. Julian didn't know about this key. Julian never watered the flowers. I unlocked the door silently. The hinges didn't creak because I keep them oiled. I stepped into the kitchen. It smelled wrong. It smelled of takeout food and cheap air freshener. There were pizza boxes on my granite island. There were empty wine bottles on the counter. I heard a voice. I crept toward the hallway. The living room was to my right. I peered around the corner. Paige was there. She was sitting on my leather recliner, the one I sat in to watch football. She had a ring light set up in front of her. She was holding a glass of wine, my wine, a 1996 Chateau Margaux that I was saving for my 50th wedding anniversary. She was talking to her phone. "Hey guys," she said, her voice pitched high and fake. "Welcome back to the channel. Tonight I want to talk about abundance. I want to talk about manifesting your destiny. You know, a lot of you ask me how I maintain such a positive vibration when things are tough. Well, it is all about visualization. I visualized this life. I visualized this house. And now, the universe is delivering." She took a sip of my wine. "My father-in-law is transitioning," she said, putting on a sad face that was as thin as tissue paper. "It is so hard. But we have to accept that when one door closes, another one opens. We are preparing to renovate this space to honor his memory. I am thinking open concept. I am thinking modern." I gripped the doorframe so hard my knuckles turned white. I wanted to walk in there. I wanted to smash that ring light. I wanted to scream at her that the universe didn't deliver this house. I did. I delivered it with 40 years of sweat and stress and late nights, but I stopped myself. If I confronted her now, she would scream. She would call the police. Julian would wake up. The plan would fail. I looked at her one last time. She was a parasite feeding on a host she thought was dead. "Enjoy the wine, Paige," I thought. "It is the last expensive thing you will ever taste." I turned away and moved toward the staircase. I climbed slowly, my boots silent on the carpet. I went to the guest bedroom. That was where they had locked Clara. The door was closed. I tried the handle. Locked, of course. I reached into my pocket. I took out a small tool I had grabbed from the junk drawer in the kitchen, a tension wrench. I picked the lock in 3 seconds. I am an engineer. Locks are just puzzles. I pushed the door open. The room was dark. It smelled stale. Clara was sitting on the edge of the bed. She was fully dressed. She was wearing her Sunday coat and holding her purse. She was sitting in the dark, waiting. She heard the door open and gasped. "Shh," I whispered. I stepped into the light from the hallway. "Ray," she breathed. She didn't look surprised. She looked relieved. She stood up. She looked frail, but her eyes were clear. "I knew you would come," she whispered. I packed a bag. She pointed to a small suitcase by the window. I grabbed it. "Where is Julian?" she asked. "He is asleep," I said, "dreaming of money. We have to go, Clara, right now." She nodded. She walked over to me and touched my face. Her hands were trembling. "You are really here," she said. "You are really walking." "I am walking," I said, "and we are running." I took her arm. We moved into the hallway. We passed the master bedroom where Julian was sleeping. I could hear his snoring. It was a wet, arrogant sound. I stopped for a second. I looked at his door. Part of me wanted to wake him up. Part of me wanted to look him in the eye and tell him he was disowned. But that was pride. And pride comes before a fall. I turned away. We went down the back stairs. We passed the kitchen. Paige was still talking to her phone. We are thinking of putting a pool in, she was saying, a big infinity pool. I guided Clara out the back door. I locked it behind me. I put the key back under the rock. Why, Clara asked as we walked through the wet grass. Because I want him to wonder, I said. I want him to think the house swallowed us. We reached the street. Sal saw us and flashed the lights once. He slid the side door open. I helped Clara in. She sat on the bench and smoothed her coat. She looked like she was going to church, not fleeing a kidnapping. I climbed in after her. My legs finally gave out and I slumped against the wall of the van. I was exhausted. My chest hurt. My head was pounding. But I looked at Clara. She reached out and took my hand. She squeezed it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. I squeezed back. "Where are we going, Ray?" she asked as the van started moving. I looked out the back window at the house disappearing into the darkness. "We are going to the mountains, Clara," I said. "We are going to watch the sun come up over a place where nobody knows our names. And then," I smiled a grim, determined smile. "And then I am going to teach our son a lesson he should have learned 20 years ago." Sal hit the gas. The van accelerated. We left the gated community behind. We left the bridge builder behind. Ray Coleman, the demolisher, was in the driver's seat now. And I had a lot of work to do. By the time the sun hit the peaks of the Shenandoah Valley, painting the sky in colors of bruised purple and gold, Clara and I were 200 miles away. We were sitting on the porch of the cabin drinking coffee that tasted like freedom and listening to the birds sing a song that did not involve heart monitors or ventilators. But while I was watching the mist rise off the mountains, my mind was back in that sterile white room in Richmond. I looked at my watch. It was 10 o'clock in the morning, the time of execution. I could picture it perfectly. In fact, I did not have to picture it because later that afternoon my lawyer Solomon would give me a play-by-play breakdown that was sweeter than any dessert I have ever tasted. At 10 o'clock sharp, Julian walked into the hospital. He was not wearing the somber clothes of a grieving son. He was wearing his lucky navy blue suit, the one he wore when he thought he was about to close a big deal. In his hand he clutched a piece of paper. It was the court order signed by a judge who had believed his lies. It was a permission slip to kill his father. Paige was with him, of course. She was wearing sunglasses indoors because she thought it made her look like a celebrity trying to be incognito. But really, she just looked like a woman hiding a hangover. She was probably already mentally redecorating the funeral home. They bypassed the nurse's station. They did not want to talk to anyone. They wanted to get to room 304, do the deed, and get to the bank before it closed. They walked with the confidence of predators who know the prey is trapped in a cage. They pushed open the door. I can imagine the sound of the hinges. I can imagine the way Julian put on his sad face, ready to tell the doctor to pull the plug. But the performance died in his throat. The room was silent. The rhythmic beep, beep, beep that had been the soundtrack to their greed for 3 weeks was gone. The ventilator was turned off, standing in the corner like a sleeping robot. And the bed. The bed was stripped. The sheets were gone. The mattress was bare, exposed, and white. It was empty. Julian must have frozen. He probably blinked, thinking he had walked into the wrong room. He checked the number on the door. 304. This was the place. This was where I was supposed to be dying. "Where is he?" Julian shouted. His voice echoed in the hallway. Paige pulled down her sunglasses. Her eyes darted around the room, checking the bathroom, checking the closet, as if a 6'2" man in a coma could be playing hide-and-seek. "He is gone!" she shrieked. "Julian, where is the body? Did he die already?" A nurse walked in. It wasn't Hattie. Hattie was safe at home, sleeping the sleep of the righteous. It was the day shift nurse, a young woman who didn't know the family drama. "Can I help you?" she asked. My father Julian yelled, waving the court order. "Raymond Coleman. He was in this bed last night. We have an order to terminate life support. Where is the body?" The nurse looked at her clipboard. She flipped a page. "Mr. Coleman," she said calmly. "Oh yes, he was discharged late last night." "Discharged?" Julian repeated the word like it was a foreign language. "What do you mean, discharged?" "He is in a coma. He is a vegetable." "You can't discharge a vegetable. Did you transfer him to the morgue?" The nurse looked at Julian with a confused expression. "No, sir. He checked out." "Checked out?" Julian grabbed the edge of the bed to steady himself. "That is impossible," he stammered. He is paralyzed. He can't move. He can't speak. The nurse shook her head. Actually, sir, according to the night report, Mr. Coleman was fully alert and ambulatory. He signed the release forms himself. His vitals were stable. He walked out of here under his own power, accompanied by his private physician. Walked out. Those two words hit Julian harder than a wrecking ball. Walked out. That meant I wasn't paralyzed. That meant I wasn't a vegetable. That meant for the last 3 weeks while he stood over my bed planning to steal my fortune and discard his mother, I had been listening. I had heard every word. I had heard the jokes about the nursing home. I had heard the insults. I had heard the glee in his voice when the doctor said I wouldn't make it. Paige started to hyperventilate. She grabbed Julian's arm, her nails digging into his expensive suit. "He heard us, Julian," she whispered, her voice rising to a panic. "He was awake. Oh my God. He knows. He knows everything." Julian pushed her away. His face was turning a shade of gray, usually reserved for wet concrete. "The house," he gasped. "Mom." He didn't say another word to the nurse. He didn't ask about my health. He turned and ran. He sprinted down the hospital corridor, his dress shoes slipping on the polished floor. Paige ran after him, her heels clicking like gunshots. They drove to the mansion like maniacs. Julian probably ran every red light in Richmond. He called the house phone over and over again, but nobody answered. Of course nobody answered. The only thing ringing in that house was the echo of his own failure. They pulled up to the gate. Julian punched the code in. His hands were shaking so bad he got it wrong twice. Finally, the iron gates swung open. The house looked normal from the outside. The lawn was mowed. The windows were shining. It looked like the fortress of wealth they thought they had conquered. They burst through the front door. Mom, Julian screamed, "Mom, where are you?" Silence. Not the peaceful silence of a happy home, but the heavy, ominous silence of a tomb. They ran to the guest room where they had locked Clara. The door was unlocked. It was standing wide open. Julian ran in. The bed was made. The closet was open. Her clothes were gone. Her knitting bag was gone. The pictures of me she kept on the nightstand were gone. "She is gone," Paige screamed from the hallway. They ran upstairs to the master bedroom. My room. The room they had been measuring for new carpets while I was fighting for my life. Julian threw the door open. My closet was empty. My suits, my shirts, my shoes, everything was gone. The safe in the corner of the room was wide open. It was empty. The cash, the bonds, the deeds, everything I kept in there was gone. They ran back downstairs to the living room. They stood in the center of the vast open space, breathing hard, sweating, looking around at the shell of a life they had tried to steal. And then they saw it. In the middle of the living room floor, sitting on the expensive Persian rug that Paige hated, was my old wheelchair, the one I used years ago when I broke my leg on a job site. It was dusty. It was rusty. And taped to the seat was a single piece of yellow legal paper. Julian walked toward it slowly like he was approaching a bomb. He reached out and peeled the paper off the vinyl seat. He read it. I know exactly what it said because I wrote it with a steady hand just before I walked out the back door into the rain. 2 words. Game over. Julian crumpled the note in his fist. He let out a scream that shook the crystal chandelier in the foyer. It was a primal scream of rage and terror. He threw the paper on the floor and kicked the wheelchair. It spun around, squeaking, mocking him. "He knows," Paige whispered. She was huddled by the fireplace, shaking. "He took her. He took the money. Julian, what do? We spent the deposit. We signed the contract for the penthouse. We need that inheritance." Julian pulled out his phone. He dialed my number. Straight to voicemail. He dialed Clara's number. Disconnected. He dialed the bank. I can imagine the conversation. I can imagine the color draining from his face as the bank manager told him that the joint accounts had been closed that morning. The funds had been transferred. The access codes had been changed. He dropped the phone. It hit the rug with a dull thud. "He is not dead," Julian whispered. "He is alive, and he has everything." Paige looked around the room. Her eyes were wild. "He can't just disappear," she said. "He is sick. He is old, and Clara is senile." "They can't just vanish, Julian. We have to find them. We have to tell the police he was kidnapped. We have to tell them his mind is gone and he took Mom against her will." Julian looked at her. The gears in his head were turning. He was desperate, and desperate men do stupid things. "You are right," he said. "We call the police. We tell them he had a psychotic break. We tell them he is dangerous. We get a silver alert. We hunt him down." He picked up his phone again. He thought he was the hunter. He thought he could use the law to drag me back to my deathbed. But he didn't know that I was already 3 steps ahead. He didn't know that while he was dialing 911, I was sitting on a mountain watching a hawk circle its prey. I took a sip of my coffee. It was getting cold, but it still tasted good. Clara came out onto the porch. She had a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She looked rested. The fear was gone from her eyes. "Is everything okay, Ray?" she asked. "Everything is perfect, Clara," I said. I looked at the phone on the table next to me. It was buzzing. A news alert. Silver alert issued for Raymond and Clara Coleman, endangered elderly couple missing from Richmond area. I smiled. "Let them look," I said to the wind. "Let them run around chasing ghosts." I picked up my tablet. It was time for phase 2. Julian wanted a show. He wanted to make this public. He wanted to drag our names through the mud to get his money. Fine. If he wanted a show, I would give him a blockbuster. I opened the camera app. I set the tablet on the porch railing. I adjusted the angle so the mountains were behind me, majestic and undeniable. "Come here, Clara," I said. "Come say hello to our son." Clara sat next to me. She looked confused, but she trusted me. "What are we doing?" she asked. "We are sending a postcard," I said. I pressed record. The red light blinked. "Hello, Julian," I said to the camera. "Hello, Paige. If you are watching this, it means you found the wheelchair. And it means you are probably telling the police right now that I am a senile old man who wandered off." I leaned into the lens. My eyes were clear. My voice was steady as steel. "I am not lost, son. I just finally found my way out of the trap you set. You wanted the house. You wanted the money. You wanted to put your mother in a warehouse to rot." I reached over and held Clara's hand. "Well, I have bad news. The bank is closed, the house is empty, and the only thing you inherited today is a lesson." I paused. "Don't bother looking for us. We are gone. And Julian, that penthouse you put a deposit on, I hope you read the cancellation policy, because I canceled the check for the down payment an hour ago." I stopped the recording. I hit send. I sent it to the Richmond Police Department. I sent it to the local news station, and I sent it to Julian. Then I turned off the tablet. "Game on," I whispered. Panic is a funny thing. It smells like sweat and expensive perfume turning sour on the skin. While Clara and I were watching the sunrise over the Blue Ridge Mountains 3 states away, enjoying a breakfast of grits and bacon, my son and his wife were getting a crash course in panic back in Richmond. You see, greed makes people stupid. It makes them count their chickens before the eggs have even been laid. And in Paige's case, it made her write a check that her bank account could not cash. The chaos started the moment they realized I wasn't dead. Paige was pacing the living room of my empty mansion, her heels clicking frantically on the hardwood floors like a telegraph tapping out an SOS. She wasn't worried about my health. She wasn't worried that her father-in-law might be wandering the streets confused. She was worried about a $50,000 non-refundable deposit she had wired yesterday to secure a penthouse in Arlington. $50,000, Julian, she screamed, throwing a vase against the wall. It shattered into a million pieces, just like their plans. I used the joint account. I used the money we were supposed to pay the mortgage with. If we don't get access to his trust fund by Friday, we lose the deposit. We lose the apartment. We lose everything. Julian was sitting on the stairs, holding his head in his hands. He looked pale. He looked like a man who had just realized he was standing on a trapdoor. "We have to find him," Julian muttered. "He can't have gone far. He was in a coma yesterday, Paige. He can't walk. He can't drive. Mom must have taken him. She's confused. She probably wheeled him out to a bus stop thinking they were going on a picnic." He stood up, his eyes lighting up with a desperate idea. "That is it," he said. "It is a kidnapping. Mom is mentally incompetent. She took a vulnerable adult out of medical care without authorization. We call the police. We tell them Dad is in immediate danger. We get a silver alert issued. A silver alert. That is the system they use to find missing senior citizens who have wandered off. It blasts a notification to every cell phone in the state. It puts your face on every highway billboard. It turns the whole world into a search party." They drove to the precinct. Julian put on his best performance yet. He didn't wear a suit this time. He wore a wrinkled t-shirt and jeans, trying to look like a frantic son who hadn't slept. Paige didn't wear makeup, trying to look distraught. They sat across from a detective, a serious man named Detective Miller, who had spent 20 years finding lost people. "Please, you have to help us," Julian sobbed, wiping fake tears from his eyes. "My father had a massive stroke. His brain, it is not working right. He thinks he is 20 years old. He thinks he is still working construction. And my mother, she has dementia. She doesn't know where she is half the time. They are out there somewhere helpless. Dad needs his medication. If he doesn't get it within 12 hours, he could die. Paige chimed in, grabbing the detective's hand. He is rich, detective, she whispered. He has millions. We are terrified that someone might have taken them, someone who wants a ransom. Please bring them home. We just want them safe. Detective Miller took notes. He looked concerned. He didn't know he was sitting across from two vipers. He saw a young couple terrified for their parents. We will issue the alert immediately, Miller said. We will check the traffic cameras. We will check the hospitals. If they are in Virginia, we will find them. An hour later, my phone buzzed. I was sitting on the deck of the cabin watching a hawk circle a field. I picked up the phone. A loud, jarring alarm was blaring from the screen. Silver alert, Raymond Coleman, 73, black male. Clara Coleman, 70, black female. Last seen, Richmond, Virginia. Medical emergency. Subjects are confused and disoriented. If seen, call 911 immediately. I looked at the notification. I looked at Clara, who was sitting in the rocking chair knitting a scarf. She looked about as confused as a fox in a henhouse. She was humming a little tune, perfectly content. They are looking for us, Ray, she said, not even looking up. I know, Clara, I said. They told the police we are crazy. Clara laughed, a soft, gentle sound. Crazy for leaving or crazy for staying, she asked. Crazy for leaving them, she said. I sipped my coffee. It was good coffee, strong and black. I opened my laptop. I went to the local news website. There was my face plastered on the homepage. It was an old photo from my retirement party. I looked happy in the picture. The headline read, "Desperate Search for Prominent Engineer and Wife." I read the article. It quoted Julian. My father is a danger to himself. We are praying for his safe return. A danger to himself. I felt a flash of anger. Not the hot rage from the hospital, but a cold, calculated anger. He was using the resources of the state, the time of good police officers, to hunt me down like a fugitive. He was wasting taxpayer money to cover his own crimes. I stood up. I am going to make a movie, Clara, I said. Clara looked up. A movie. A short film, I said. I went into the kitchen. I grabbed the newspaper I had bought at a gas station when we crossed the state line. The Charlotte Observer. Today's date was printed clearly at the top. October 14th. I set up my tablet on the patio table. I made sure the background showed the mountains, but nothing identifiable. No street signs, no landmarks, just trees and sky. I sat down. I put on my reading glasses. I placed the newspaper in front of me. I placed my mug of coffee next to it. I hit record. The little red light started blinking. I looked into the lens. I didn't look confused. I didn't look frail. I looked like the man who had ordered tons of steel to be lifted into the sky. My name is Raymond Coleman. I began, my voice deep and steady. I am 73 years old. I am holding a copy of today's Charlotte Observer to prove the date. I held up the paper. I am making this video to address the silver alert that has been issued for me and my wife Clara. I took a sip of coffee. I let the silence hang for a moment. I am not lost. I am not confused. And I am certainly not in need of medical rescue. The only thing I am in need of is peace and quiet. I leaned closer to the camera. My son Julian Coleman reported me missing because he went to my hospital room this morning to pull the plug on my life support and found the bed empty. He reported me missing because he went to my house to sell my furniture and found it locked. He reported me missing because he realized the bank accounts he was planning to drain were already closed. I picked up the newspaper and folded it. I am not a victim of a kidnapping. I am a victim of ungrateful children. My wife Clara is here with me. She is safe. She is happy. And she is not going to any nursing home called Shady Acres. I stared hard into the lens, imagining Julian's face on the other side. To the Richmond Police Department, I apologize for the waste of your time. My son lied to you. He is using you as his personal bloodhounds. Please cancel the alert. We are fine. We are just retired. And to Julian, I paused. A small smile played on my lips. Stop looking for us. You won't find us. And stop looking for the money. You won't find that either. You said I was a vegetable, son. Well, this vegetable just learned how to use online banking. I reached out and stopped the recording. I watched it back. It was perfect. It was calm. It was rational. It was the ultimate rebuttal. I emailed the video file directly to the public information officer at the Richmond Police Precinct. I also CC'd the news station that was running the story. And just for good measure, I sent a copy to Julian's work email. Then I sat back and waited. It didn't take long. Back in Richmond, the atmosphere in the precinct changed instantly. Detective Miller watched the video on his computer monitor. He watched it twice. He saw a man who was clearly articulate, clearly mobile, and clearly furious. He stood up and walked over to where Julian and Paige were sitting huddled together pretending to cry. Mr. Coleman, the detective, said, his voice hard. Julian looked up, hopeful. "Did you find them? Are they okay?" Detective Miller turned his monitor around. "I think you should watch this." Julian watched. Paige watched. As the video played, as my voice filled the room recounting their crimes, I saw in my mind's eye the color drain from their faces. They saw their narrative crumbling. They saw their lies being exposed to the police. When the video ended, Detective Miller crossed his arms. "That doesn't look like a man in a vegetative state, Mr. Coleman. And he doesn't sound confused. He sounds like a man who is tired of your nonsense." Julian stammered. He is faking it. He is having a moment of clarity. It happens. He is still sick. You have to go get him." Detective Miller shook his head. "We don't go get people who don't want to be found, Julian, unless they are a danger to themselves or others. Your father is drinking coffee and reading the paper. The only danger he poses is to your inheritance." The detective picked up his phone. "I am canceling the silver alert, and I suggest you two leave my station before I start asking questions about this filing a false police report." Julian stood up. He was shaking. He looked at the screen where my frozen image was smiling at him. "He can't do this," he whispered. "He can't just take everything." "He just did," Paige hissed, pulling him toward the exit. "Let's go." "They are looking at us." They walked out of the station. The humiliation was total, but the real pain was just beginning. Back at the cabin, my phone buzzed again. "Silver alert canceled. Raymond and Clara Coleman have been located and are safe." I showed the message to Clara. "We are free," I said. Clara smiled and went back to her knitting. "Good," she said. I never liked being the center of attention anyway. I closed my laptop. The police were off my back. But now Julian was desperate. And a desperate man is a dangerous man. He would try something else. He would try to get the money another way. But I was ready. I had built bridges over rushing water. I knew how to divert the flow. I picked up my phone and dialed my broker. "Hello, Ray," he answered. "It is time to sell," I said. "Sell what, Ray?" "Everything," I said. "The stocks, the bonds, the investment properties. Turn it all into liquid cash." "But Ray, the tax implications." "Do it," I said. "And send the proceeds to the offshore trust we set up." I hung up. I looked at the mountains. Julian wanted a war. I was about to give him a scorched earth campaign. There is a specific sound that a man makes when his financial throat is cut. It is not a scream. It is not a cry for help. It is a sharp intake of breath followed by the frantic clicking of a mouse and the desperate tapping of a keyboard. 300 miles away in my cabin, I could not hear Julian making that sound, but I could feel it. I knew exactly what he was doing, because I knew exactly what time his debts were due. Julian was not just living beyond his means, he was living in a fantasy world funded by high-interest loans and leverage. He had leveraged his future inheritance to pay for his present mistakes. He had borrowed money from people who do not send late notices in the mail. They send men with baseball bats. And today was the first of the month, the day the sharks came to feed. I sat on my porch with my laptop open, monitoring the server logs of my company, Coleman Structural Engineering. At 9:15 in the morning, the red light on my screen blinked. Someone was trying to access the corporate master account. It was Julian. I knew his IP address. I knew his location. He was sitting in my home office, probably sweating through his shirt, trying to transfer $50,000 to a shell company in the Cayman Islands to pay off his bookie. He entered the password. It was the password I had given him 5 years ago when I made him a junior partner. A symbolic gesture. A test. The screen on his end would have paused for a second. He would have smiled, thinking the money was on its way. Then the message appeared. Access denied. He would have frowned. He would have typed it again carefully, one finger at a time, thinking he made a typo. Access denied. Account frozen. Contact administrator. I watched the attempts pile up. 3, 4, 5. He was panicking. He was realizing that the golden goose hadn't just flown the coop, it had locked the barn door on the way out. What Julian did not know is that on the day I went into the hospital before the coma took me completely, I had a moment of clarity. I called my IT director, a man named Kevin, who I had hired out of college. I told him to install a kill switch. It is a protocol used in high-security engineering firms to prevent corporate espionage. With one command, I could lock every account, every server, and every asset associated with my name. I pressed the Enter key on my laptop. Execute Protocol 0. Instantly, Julian's access didn't just fail. It was erased. His company email was deleted. His keycard to the office was deactivated. His credit cards, which were attached to the business account, were reported stolen. I leaned back in my rocking chair. I imagined him staring at the black screen, the reflection of his terrified face staring back at him. He was broke. He was exposed. And the sharks were swimming closer. But I wasn't done. I looked at the house, my beautiful mansion in Richmond, the place where I had raised him, the place where he and Paige were currently squatting, drinking my wine, and planning their renovations. They thought possession was 9/10 of the law. They thought that because they were inside the house, they owned it. They forgot that a house is just an asset, and assets can be liquidated. I picked up my phone. I dialed a number I hadn't called in years. It belonged to Marcus Sterling. Marcus was a shark of a different kind. He was a real estate investor who specialized in distressed properties. He bought houses for cash, usually from people going through messy divorces or bankruptcy. He didn't care about curb appeal. He cared about the bottom line. Ray Coleman. Marcus answered, his voice booming. To what do I owe the pleasure? I saw you on the news. You okay? I am fine, Marcus, I said. I am better than fine. I am cleaning house. What can I do for you, Ray? I want to sell the Richmond estate, I said. Marcus paused. The big house, the one on the hill. Ray, that is a $5 million property. It will take 6 months to move a beast like that. You need to stage it. You need to market it. I don't have 6 months, Marcus, I said. I have 6 hours. There was silence on the line. I could hear Marcus doing the math in his head. I want out today, I said. I am offering it to you for $3 million. Cash. Closing by noon. $3 million. Marcus choked. Ray, that is 40% under market value. Are you serious? Dead serious, I said. But there are conditions. Name them, Marcus said, his voice trembling with greed. Condition 1, as is. No inspections, no walkthroughs. You buy the bricks and everything inside them. Done, Marcus said. Condition 2, immediate possession. The deed transfers the second the wire hits my offshore account. Done. Condition 3, I said, my voice dropping low. There are squatters on the premises. Marcus laughed. A cruel barking sound. Squatters in a gated community. Who are they? My son and his wife, I said. Marcus went quiet for a second. Family trouble, Ray. It is not family anymore, Marcus, I said. It is just business. Do you have a problem evicting them? Marcus snorted. Ray, for a $2 million discount, I would evict the Pope. I have a security team on retainer. We specialize in difficult transitions. Good, I said. Send the contract. 10 minutes later, the email arrived. I signed it digitally. I authorized the transfer of the deed. I watched the progress bar on my screen. Sending, sending, sent. At 11:45 a.m., my phone buzzed. A wire transfer notification from the bank in the Cayman Islands. $3 million. The house was gone. It wasn't my home anymore. It was just a building owned by Sterling Holdings, LLC. I closed my laptop. I looked at Clara. She was watering the geraniums on the porch, singing a hymn. She didn't need a mansion. She needed peace. And I had just bought us a lot of peace. Back in Richmond, the clock struck noon. Paige was sleeping in. She usually slept until 1. She was lying in my master bed, wrapped in my Egyptian cotton sheets, dreaming of the penthouse she was about to lose. She didn't know that Julian was downstairs, frantically calling every bank in the city, trying to find a dime. She rolled over, burying her face in the pillow. Then she heard it. The front door didn't open with a key. It opened with a battering ram. Bam! The heavy oak doors flew open, smashing against the walls. Paige sat up, her heart hammering. "Julian," she screamed. "Julian, what is that?" She heard heavy footsteps on the stairs. Not the frantic footsteps of her husband, but the heavy, measured tread of men wearing tactical boots. She scrambled out of bed, grabbing a silk robe to cover herself. She ran into the hallway. She froze. Standing at the top of the stairs were 3 men. They were huge. They wore black polo shirts with sterling security embroidered on the chest. They looked like bouncers who had been fed a diet of raw meat and steroids. Behind them stood Marcus Sterling wearing a linen suit and holding a piece of paper. "Who are you?" Paige shrieked, pulling the robe tighter. "Get out. This is private property. I am calling the police." Marcus stepped forward. He didn't look impressed. He looked bored. "You are right, ma'am," he said, holding up the deed. "This is private property, and you are trespassing on it." "What?" Paige stammered. "My name is Marcus Sterling. I purchased this residence 20 minutes ago. The previous owner, Mr. Raymond Coleman, sold it to me with immediate possession. That means everything inside the walls belongs to me." He looked her up and down with a sneer. "Except you. You are a liability, and I don't like liabilities." Julian ran out of the office downstairs. He looked up at the landing, his face pale as a sheet. "Who are you people?" he yelled. "Get out of my house." "Your house," Marcus laughed. "Son, this hasn't been your house since about 11:59. I have the title right here." He motioned to the security guards. "Gentlemen, escort these guests off the premises." The guards moved. They didn't run, they just flowed like a black tide. 2 of them grabbed Julian. He tried to fight, he tried to swing a fist, but they pinned his arms behind his back with practiced ease. "Let me go!" Julian screamed. "My father owns this house. You can't sell it without his permission." "His permission is right here on the digital signature," Marcus said, waving the tablet. "He gave me a very good deal. Now move!" The 3rd guard walked toward Paige. "I need to get dressed," she screamed, backing into the bedroom. "I need my clothes. I need my jewelry. My bags are in there." The guard blocked the door. "Sorry, ma'am," Marcus called out. The contract was clear. Sold as is. Contents included. Your clothes, your jewelry, your bags. They are part of the inventory now. "You can't do this," Paige shrieked. "I am naked under this robe." The guard grabbed her arm. He wasn't rough, but he wasn't gentle either. He was efficient. "You can keep the robe," the guard said. "Let's go." They dragged them down the stairs. Julian was kicking and shouting threats about lawyers and lawsuits. Paige was crying, mascara running down her cheeks, begging for her Louis Vuitton purse. They didn't listen. They marched them to the front door. They threw them out, literally. Julian stumbled down the front steps and landed on the paved driveway, scraping his hands. Paige was shoved out after him, nearly tripping over her own robe. The security guard stood in the doorway, blocking the entrance. "You have 5 minutes to get off the property," Marcus said, stepping out onto the porch. "After that, I call the police and press charges for criminal trespass. And believe me, the police around here know me better than they know you." Julian stood up, brushing the dirt off his knees. He looked at the house. He looked at the window of the room where he had grown up. He looked at the fortress he thought was his birthright. "Dad," he whispered. He realized then the scope of what I had done. I hadn't just cut him off. I had erased him. I had sold the roof over his head to a stranger just to teach him a lesson. "My car." Paige sobbed, pointing to the garage. "My Mercedes. It is in the garage." Marcus checked his clipboard. "Mercedes-Benz S-Class. Black. Yes, that is listed on the bill of sale as chattel property. It stays." He smiled a shark smile. "Nice car, though. I might keep it for myself." He turned and walked back inside. The heavy doors slammed shut. The sound echoed across the neighborhood. Julian and Paige stood there on the driveway. He in his sweat-stained shirt and she in a silk robe and bare feet. The neighbors were coming out of their houses now. Phones were raised. Videos were being recorded. The humiliation was complete. But as Julian looked at the closed door, he realized something worse than homelessness was coming. He realized that without the house, without the car, and without the bank accounts, he had no way to pay the people he owed. And those people were not as polite as Marcus Sterling. He looked at Paige. She was screaming at him, hitting his chest with her fists, blaming him for everything. "Do something," she yelled. "Fix this." Julian looked at her. He looked at the woman who had convinced him to betray his father. "I can't," he whispered. He looked at the sky. "He is watching us," he said. "He is doing this right now." 300 miles away, I closed my eyes and listened to the wind in the trees. I took a deep breath. "One domino down," I whispered. 2 to go. The asphalt of the driveway was hot enough to fry an egg, but not nearly as hot as the rage radiating off my daughter-in-law. Paige stood there in her silk robe, barefoot on the pavement, screaming at the closed front door like a banshee who had been locked out of hell. She hammered her fists against the wood until her knuckles bled. She kicked the frame until her toes cracked. She shrieked threats that would have made a sailor blush, promising lawsuits and hellfire and the wrath of God. But the door did not open. It was solid oak 2 inches thick, reinforced with steel. I know because I installed it myself 20 years ago to keep the bad things out. I never imagined that one day it would be used to keep the bad things out when those bad things were my own family. Julian stood a few feet behind her. He was not screaming. He was vibrating. It was the vibration of a man whose reality has just shattered into a million jagged pieces, and he is trying to hold them together with his bare hands. He looked at the house, then at the closed garage door where his car was locked inside, then at his wife who was currently having a psychotic break on the front porch. "Fix this!" Julian Page screamed, turning on him. Her mascara was running down her face in black streaks, making her look like a melted raccoon. "You are the man. Do something. Break a window. Kick the door down. Get my purse. My credit cards are in there. My ID is in there. I am naked, Julian. I am standing in the street in a robe." Julian ran his hands through his hair, pulling at the roots. "I can't break in, Paige," he hissed. "That is Marcus Sterling in there. He has armed security. If I throw a rock, they will shoot me. And legally, they might get away with it." Legally, Paige laughed a wild, hysterical sound. "Since when do you care about the law? You tried to kill your father yesterday. Now get me back in that house." That was when the sirens started. Not the distant wail of a passing ambulance, but the sharp, aggressive whoop-whoop of police cruisers turning into the cul-de-sac. 2 squad cars pulled up, lights flashing blue and red, bouncing off the brick facade of my former home. Paige stopped screaming. A look of relief washed over her face. She thought the cavalry had arrived. She thought she could charm her way out of this. She tightened the belt of her robe, wiped her face, and put on her best victim smile. "Thank God," she said, walking toward the first officer stepping out of the car. "Officer, you have to help us. There are men in our house, armed men. They threw us out. They stole my jewelry. It is a home invasion." The officer was a young man with a buzz cut and a face that said he had zero patience for domestic disputes in rich neighborhoods. He didn't look at Paige's smile. He looked at the clipboard in his hand. "Are you Julian and Paige Coleman?" he asked. "Yes," Paige said, tears welling up in her eyes instantly. "We are the victims. My father-in-law—" The officer held up a hand, stopping her mid-sob. "We received a call from the property owner, Mr. Sterling, regarding 2 individuals trespassing on the premises and causing a disturbance. He says you were served with a notice to vacate and refused to leave the property line." "Refused?" Paige shrieked, dropping the act. "We live here. This is our house. You can't trespass on your own property." The officer looked at Julian. "Sir, do you have a deed? Do you have a lease? Do you have any proof of residency or ownership in your name?" Julian opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked at the ground. "My father," he mumbled. "Your father sold the property," the officer said. "We verified the title transfer with the county clerk 10 minutes ago. Mr. Coleman, this is no longer your residence. You have been evicted, and Mr. Sterling is pressing charges for disturbing the peace if you don't remove yourselves from the curb immediately." Paige lunged at the officer. She actually tried to grab his badge. "You are lying," she screamed. "It is a conspiracy. You are all working for him." The officer stepped back, his hand dropping to his taser. "Ma'am, take a step back. Now." Julian grabbed Paige around the waist and hauled her back. He knew better than to fight a cop on the sidewalk. He knew that was a fight he would lose. "Can we at least get our things?" Julian asked, his voice broken and small. "Our clothes, my laptop, her purse." "We have nothing, officer. Look at us." The officer sighed. He keyed his radio. "I will ask the owner if he is willing to release any personal effects." He walked up to the front door and knocked. The door opened. Marcus Sterling appeared holding a cigar. He spoke to the officer for a moment, then nodded. He snapped his fingers, and one of the security guards appeared carrying 2 black, heavy-duty trash bags. He threw them down the steps. They landed with a wet thud on the driveway. One bag split open, spilling Julian's expensive Italian suits onto the dirty asphalt. "There you go," Marcus called out. "Courtesy of the management. Now get off my lawn." The door slammed shut again. Julian walked over to the bags. He picked up a shoe. It was scuffed. He picked up a shirt. It was wrinkled. This was his inheritance. This was what was left of the empire he thought he deserved. 2 trash bags of clothes and a pair of bruised egos. But the humiliation wasn't done yet. The commotion had drawn a crowd. In a neighborhood like this, gossip travels faster than fiber optic internet. Doors were opening all down the street. People were stepping out onto their porches holding coffee cups and cell phones. And right across the street stood Mrs. Higgins. Mrs. Higgins was the head of the Homeowners Association. She was a woman Paige had tormented for years. Paige had reported Mrs. Higgins for having grass that was half an inch too high. She had made fun of Mrs. Higgins' car. She had called Mrs. Higgins a peasant to her face at the block party last year. Now Mrs. Higgins was standing on her front lawn holding her iPhone up horizontally, filming the entire scene. "Smile, Paige." Mrs. Higgins called out, her voice sweet as poison. "You are live on Facebook." Paige turned around. She saw the phone. She saw the neighbors watching. She saw the judgment in their eyes. The social status she had cultivated so carefully, the illusion of wealth and power she had built it all, evaporated in the heat of the afternoon sun. "Stop filming me!" she screamed, covering her face with her hands. "Stop it, you old hag!" Mrs. Higgins just zoomed in. "Say cheese, dear. Tell us again how rich you are." Julian grabbed the trash bags. He grabbed Paige's arm. "We have to go," he whispered. "Go where," Paige sobbed, pulling away from him. "We don't have a car, Julian. We don't have money. Where are we going to go?" Julian looked around. He felt the walls closing in. The reality of the situation finally hit him with the force of a freight train. This wasn't just bad luck. This wasn't a clerical error. This was a systematic dismantling of his entire existence. First, the hospital bed was empty. Then the bank accounts were frozen. Then the house was sold. Then the humiliation. It was a checklist. Someone was checking off boxes one by one. It wasn't random. It was engineered. And he knew only one man capable of engineering a collapse this precise. "Dad," he whispered. He dropped the bags. He reached into his pocket. His phone was the only thing he had left. His hands were shaking so badly he almost dropped it. He scrolled through his contacts. Ray Coleman. He hit dial. He didn't expect an answer. He expected voicemail. He expected the cold silence of a disconnected line. He wanted to scream his rage into the void. Ring, ring, click. The line opened. There was silence on the other end. No hello, no question, just the sound of breathing. Calm, steady breathing. Julian froze. He pressed the phone to his ear so hard it hurt. "Dad," he choked out. The silence continued. "Dad, are you there?" Still nothing. But he knew. He could feel the presence on the other end. He could feel the eyes watching him from 300 miles away. "Dad, you are crazy," Julian screamed, his voice cracking. "You are insane. Do you know what you did? You sold the house. We are on the street. Paige is in a robe. We have nothing. How could you do this? We are your family. I am your son." I waited. I sat on my porch in the mountains listening to the tiny, tinny voice of my son screaming through the speaker. I took a slow sip of my coffee. I let him scream. I let him pour out all his fear and his entitlement. "You ruined me," Julian yelled. "You destroyed everything. Why? Why would you do this to us?" I cleared my throat. The sound was loud in the silence. Julian stopped breathing. He waited. I leaned into the phone. I spoke softly, clearly, without an ounce of anger. Just the cold, hard facts. "Shady Acres," I said. Julian gasped. What he whispered. "Shady Acres," I repeated. "The state-run facility." I looked it up, Julian. "They have vacancies." I paused, letting the words sink in like hooks. "I hear it is very cheap," I said, "especially for people who don't have any assets." "No," Julian stammered. "Dad, no." I didn't let him finish. I didn't want to hear his begging. I didn't want to hear his lies. I had heard enough lies to last a lifetime. "Good luck, son," I said. I pressed the red button. Click. The line went dead. Back on the driveway, Julian stood frozen with the phone pressed to his ear. The dial tone buzzed in his brain. "Shady Acres." The words echoed in his skull. It wasn't a threat. It was a mirror. I had held up a mirror to his soul and shown him exactly what he was. He had planned to throw his mother into the trash to save money. Now he was the trash. He looked at Paige, who was sitting on the curb crying into her hands. He looked at the neighbors who were still filming. He looked at the closed door of the house he used to own. He realized then that the war was over. He had lost. And the general who defeated him wasn't some stranger. It was the man who had taught him how to tie his shoes. Julian dropped the phone. It cracked on the pavement. He didn't pick it up. He sat down on the curb next to his wife. He put his head in his hands. "He is not crazy," Julian whispered to the asphalt. Paige looked up, her mascara-smeared eyes wide. "What did he say?" she asked. "He is not crazy," Julian repeated, a hysterical laugh bubbling up in his throat. "He is perfectly sane, and he hates us." "He hates us," Paige whispered. "No," Julian said. "He doesn't hate us. He just doesn't care anymore. And that is so much worse." A taxi pulled up. The police officer had called it for them out of pity. "Get in," the officer said, "or I take you to the station." Julian stood up. He grabbed the black trash bags. He grabbed his wife's hand. They climbed into the back of the cab. "Where to?" the driver asked. Julian looked at the driver. He opened his mouth to say the Ritz or the Marriott or any of the places he used to stay. But then he remembered his bank balance. 0. He remembered his credit score. Ruined. He looked at Paige. She was shivering. "Just drive," Julian said. "Just drive away from here." As the taxi pulled away, Mrs. Higgins waved goodbye with her phone. 300 miles away, I put my phone down on the table. I watched a blue jay land on the railing. "One lesson delivered," I said to Clara. She looked up from her knitting and smiled. "Did he understand it?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. "But give him time. Hunger is a very effective teacher." I closed my eyes and listened to the mountains. The air felt lighter. The burden was lifting. I had amputated the gangrenous limb. Now the healing could finally begin. They say a lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. I do not know who said that, but they must have met my daughter-in-law. If there was an Olympic sport for twisting reality into a pretzel, Paige would have a gold medal hanging around her neck. While Claire and I were sitting on the balcony of a suite at the Four Seasons in Miami watching the ocean turn turquoise under the morning sun, my son and his wife were busy turning me into the most hated man in America. It had been 48 hours since they were evicted from the mansion. 48 hours since I cut off the money. In that time, most people would have done some soul-searching. They would have looked in the mirror and asked themselves where they went wrong. But Julian and Paige were not most people. They were survivors of their own disasters. And when a parasite is ripped off its host, it does not apologize. It looks for a new host, and the new host was the public. I turned on the 60-inch television in the living room of our suite. I poured myself a glass of orange juice freshly squeezed. Clara was in the bedroom napping. The sea air was good for her. She was sleeping more soundly than she had in years. I flipped the channel to the local morning news. And there they were. They were sitting on a beige couch in the studio of Good Morning Richmond. The caption at the bottom of the screen read, "Heartbreak in the Highlands, a son's plea." I had to give it to them. The wardrobe choices were brilliant. Julian was wearing a sweater that looked slightly too big for him, making him look small and vulnerable. He wasn't wearing his Rolex. He wasn't wearing his Italian shoes. He looked like a man who had been broken. Paige was wearing a modest gray dress with no jewelry and very little makeup. She held a tissue in her hand, twisting it nervously. The host, a woman with sympathetic eyes and a voice like warm syrup, leaned forward. "Julian Paige, thank you for being brave enough to come here today. I know this is incredibly difficult for you." Julian sniffled. He looked down at his hands. "Thank you for having us," he whispered. We just want them home." The host turned to the camera. "For those of you just joining us, we are talking about the shocking disappearance of Raymond and Clara Coleman. Initially reported as a missing persons case, it has now taken a dark turn. Ray Coleman, a wealthy retired engineer, has allegedly emptied the family bank accounts, sold the family home out from under his children, and vanished with his wife, who suffers from dementia." She turned back to Julian. "Julian, tell us about your father. Was there any sign that he was planning this?" Julian looked up. His eyes were wet. He had practiced this. I could tell. He pulled his earlobe. "No," he lied. "Dad has been struggling. Since the stroke 3 weeks ago, his personality changed. He became paranoid. He started thinking everyone was out to get him. He forgot who I was sometimes. Paige chimed in, her voice trembling. He accused us of stealing, she said, wiping a tear. Can you imagine? We gave up our jobs to care for them. I spent every day at the hospital by his side. Julian paid for all the medical bills out of his own pocket. We drained our savings to make sure he had the best care. And then... She broke down, sobbing into the tissue. And then he threw us out. Julian finished for her. He woke up one day in a manic state. He used a power of attorney that he tricked his lawyer into activating. He sold the house. He took the money we had set aside for Mom's care. He left us on the street with nothing but the clothes on our backs. The host shook her head, looking disgusted. So let me get this straight. You supported them. You loved them. And in a moment of medical confusion, he destroyed your lives. Yes, Julian said. But we don't care about the money. We don't care about the house. We just want Mom back. She is sick. She needs her medication. He is dragging her around the country, and she probably doesn't even know where she is. It is kidnapping, plain and simple. The host looked at the camera again. You heard it here, folks. A tragic story of elder mental health and a family torn apart. If you see Raymond Coleman, please contact the authorities. And if you want to help Julian and Paige rebuild their lives, there is a GoFundMe link on our website. They are currently staying in a motel and need our support. I watched the screen. I watched the donation counter on the bottom ticker. It was climbing. $5,000. $10,000. People were donating. Strangers were sending money to the man who had planned to throw his mother in a state-run nursing home. I picked up my tablet. I opened Twitter. It was a bloodbath. The hashtag selfish Ray was trending. I can't believe a father would do this to his own son. Dementia is real, guys. It's real. This old man needs to be in a facility, not running around spending his kid's inheritance. Julian looks heartbroken. I just donated $50. Hope they find that monster. Monster. That was what they were calling me. A monster. A senile tyrant. A thief. I took a sip of my juice. It tasted sweet. I looked at Julian on the screen. He was hugging Paige, now comforting her while she cried crocodile tears. They were good. They were really good. They had taken the narrative and flipped it upside down. They had turned their victimhood into a currency. They thought they had won the court of public opinion. They thought that if they screamed loud enough, the truth would hide in the corner. But they forgot one thing. I am an engineer. I record data, I measure stress, and I keep receipts. I picked up my phone. I dialed Solomon. He answered on the first ring. Are you watching this, Ray? He asked. I am watching, I said calmly. It is a circus, Solomon said, his voice tight with anger. They are slandering you, Ray. They are accusing you of financial abuse. We can sue them for defamation. We can issue a cease and desist. No, I said. No lawsuits, Solomon. That takes too long. And it makes me look defensive. Then what do you want to do? Solomon asked. The public is eating this up. That GoFundMe is up to $20,000. They are getting rich off their lies. I laughed. It was a low rumble in my chest. Let them make a little money, I said. It will make the fall hurt more. Ray. What is the play here? Solomon asked. The play is the truth, I said. Do you have the file? I asked. I have it, Solomon said. The digital forensic team cleaned up the audio. It is crystal clear. Recording number 3, I said. Are you sure? Solomon asked. That is the nuclear option, Ray. Once that is out there, there is no coming back for them. They will be pariahs. They might even face criminal charges for conspiracy. Good, I said. But Ray, Solomon hesitated. It is humiliating. For you too. People will hear what they really think of you. I don't care what people think of me, I said, looking at the TV screen where Julian was now showing a picture of himself as a child sitting on my lap. I care about what is true. I watched Julian wipe his nose. He wants a story. Solomon, I said. He wants to tell the world how much he loves his parents. He wants to tell the world about his sacrifice. I paused. Let's help him tell the story. Release it, I said. Release it where? Solomon asked. Everywhere, I said. Send it to the station that is airing that interview right now. Send it to the police. Send it to the local papers. And upload it to social media. Tag that hashtag they love so much. Hashtag selfish Ray, I added. Consider it done, Solomon said. I hung up the phone. I looked back at the TV. The interview was wrapping up. The host was holding Julian's hand. "We are rooting for you, Julian," she said, "and we hope your father comes to his senses." I smiled. "I am coming to my senses," I whispered to the screen. I stood up and walked to the balcony. The ocean breeze was warm. I closed my eyes and listened to the waves crashing against the shore. Recording number 3. I remembered the moment I recorded it. It was the second night in the hospital. I was awake, but paralyzed. Julian and Paige had come in late thinking the nurses were busy. They were drunk. They had been celebrating. They stood over my bed and they talked. They didn't talk about renovations or nursing homes that night. They talked about hate. They talked about how much they despised me. They talked about how I was boring, how I was stingy, how I smelled like dirt and concrete. Paige had laughed and said she couldn't wait to burn my clothes. Julian had said he wished I had died 10 years ago so he could have enjoyed his 30s. It was the raw, unfiltered sound of malice, and in about 10 minutes the whole world was going to hear it. I went back inside. I poured myself a glass of bourbon. It was a little early for whiskey, but today was a special occasion. I sat down in the armchair and unmuted the TV. The commercial break was ending. The news anchor came back on. Her face looked pale. She touched her earpiece. She looked confused. "Welcome back," she said, her voice faltering. We have a breaking update on the Coleman story. We have just received an audio file from Raymond Coleman's attorney." She looked off camera. Can we play this?" She nodded. "We are going to play a portion of this recording. I must warn our viewers the language is graphic and the content is disturbing." The screen went black. A waveform appeared. And then Julian's voice filled the room. Not the sad, soft voice from the interview, but the slurred, arrogant voice of a drunk man. God, why won't he just die already? He is so stubborn. Even in a coma, he is annoying. Then Paige's voice. High and cruel. "Just think of the money, babe. 5 million. We can burn this whole life down. I am going to buy a boat. I am going to buy diamonds. And the best part, we never have to see that drooling old man again. Then Julian again. And Mom. Don't forget Mom. Shady Acres is too good for her. Maybe we just leave the back door open and let her wander off. Save us the monthly fee." Laughter. Cruel, drunken laughter. The audio cut off. The camera cut back to the studio. The host looked like she was going to be sick. She looked at Julian, who was sitting on the couch next to her. Julian's face was white, not pale. White. He was staring at the monitor with his mouth open. Paige was gripping the armrest, her knuckles tearing through the fabric. The host pulled her hand away from Julian like he was radioactive. "Is that you?" she asked. Her voice was ice cold. "Is that your voice?" Julian stammered. It is AI. It is fake." He made it up. The host shook her head. "We had our audio technicians verify the signature," she said. "It is authentic. And the timestamp places it in your father's hospital room 2 nights ago." She looked into the camera. "I think we need to take a break," she said. But they didn't cut to commercial fast enough. I saw it. I saw the moment the mask fell off. I saw Paige turn on Julian screaming silently. I saw Julian put his head in his hands. I saw the studio crew looking at them with pure disgust. I took a sip of my bourbon. The GoFundMe counter on the bottom of the screen stopped. Then it started going backwards. Refunds. People were taking their money back. The hashtag on my tablet changed. Hashtag Selfish Ray was gone. New hashtags were appearing. Hashtag Monster Children. Hashtag Save Ray. Hashtag Justice for Clara. I laughed. It was a good morning in Miami. I stood up and went to the bedroom. Clara was waking up. She stretched and smiled at me. "Did I miss anything, Ray?" she asked. "Nothing important, Clara," I said. "Just a little TV drama." I sat on the edge of the bed and took her hand. "How about we go get some lobster for lunch?" I asked. Clara's eyes lit up. "I love lobster," she said. I kissed her hand. Then lobster it is. We had won the battle of the bank account. Now we had won the battle of the reputation. Julian and Paige were naked now, stripped of their money and stripped of their lies. And the best part, I hadn't even raised my voice. The silence that followed the playing of recording number 3 was heavy enough to crush a tank. In the television studio, the air had been sucked out of the room, leaving a vacuum of pure shock. In my hotel suite in Miami, I sat on the edge of the sofa gripping my glass of bourbon, watching the color drain from my son's face on high definition. It is a rare thing to watch a human soul being stripped naked on live television. Usually people have the decency to hide their sins in the dark, but Julian and Paige had brought theirs into the spotlight, and now the spotlight was burning them alive. The news anchor, a woman who 10 minutes ago had been holding Julian's hand and offering him tissues, looked like she had just realized she was holding a handful of toxic waste. She physically recoiled. She scooted her chair a good 6 inches away from them on the set. Her face was a mask of professional horror, trying to maintain composure while digesting the vile words that had just echoed through the studio speakers. "We need to," she stammered, looking off camera to her producer. "We need to clarify something. That voice. That was you, Mrs. Coleman." Paige tried to speak. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish on a dock, but no sound came out. The arrogant, self-assured life coach who lectured people on manifesting abundance was gone. In her place was a terrified woman realizing that her career was currently incinerating in real time. It was taken out of context, she finally choked out. Her voice was high and thin. We were stressed. It was a joke. A dark joke to cope with the trauma. The anchor shook her head slowly. Her eyes were cold. A joke she repeated flatly. "You called your mother-in-law a burden. You said, and I quote, 'Pull the plug, babe. The old lady is just a drain on the assets. I want to turn the master bedroom into a yoga studio.'" She paused, letting the cruelty of that sentence hang in the air. "You wanted to turn a grieving widow's bedroom into a yoga studio before her husband was even buried." Julian tried to intervene. He put a hand on Paige's arm, trying to steady her, but his own hand was shaking so violently it looked like a spasm. "Look," he said, his voice cracking. "You don't understand the pressure we were under. Grief makes people say crazy things. We love my parents. That recording is manipulated. My father has millions of dollars. He hired experts to fake this." The anchor touched her earpiece. She listened for a second, then looked back at Julian with a gaze that could freeze water. "Actually, Mr. Coleman, our producers have just confirmed that the metadata on the file is authentic. It was recorded on a smartwatch located in room 304 of Richmond General Hospital at 11:45 p.m. on Tuesday. The voice print matches." She turned to the camera. "We are going to take a short break." The feed didn't cut instantly. For 3 seconds, America saw the truth. They saw Julian put his head in his hands. They saw Paige scream something at him. They saw the cameramen lower their cameras, not out of respect, but out of disgust. Then the commercial played. It was an ad for life insurance. The irony was not lost on me. I picked up my tablet. If the TV studio was a disaster zone, social media was a nuclear wasteland. The tide hadn't just turned, it had become a tsunami. The hashtag #SaveRay was trending #1 globally. But it wasn't just support for me, it was a witch hunt for them. I scrolled through the comments on Paige's Instagram page. She had spent years building a brand based on positivity and wellness. She had 50,000 followers who bought her courses and listened to her podcasts. Now the comments were scrolling so fast, I couldn't read them all. "You manifest death, not abundance. I want a refund on your course, you monster." Yoga studio. "You need a prison cell. How could you do that to an old woman? #Justice for Clara." Then came the emails. I didn't see them directly, but I saw the result. Paige's phone, which was sitting on the coffee table in the TV studio, started lighting up. Even on the muted wide shot of the studio feed, I could see it buzzing relentlessly. It wasn't friends calling to check on her. It was the sponsors. I knew how these contracts worked. I knew about the morality clauses. A brand that sells organic tea or yoga mats cannot be associated with a woman who plots to kill her father-in-law for real estate. Paige looked at her phone. She read a notification. She dropped the phone like it was hot. She started to cry. Real tears this time. Tears of financial ruin. And then it was Julian's turn. His phone didn't buzz with social media notifications. It buzzed with a call from a number I recognized. It was Marcus Sterling, not the landlord, but the investor. The head of the venture capital firm that was backing Julian's boutique brokerage. Julian looked at the caller ID. He knew he had to answer. He picked up the phone right there on the set during the commercial break. "Hello, Mr. Henderson," he whispered. I couldn't hear the other side of the call, but I could see Julian's face. I saw the blood drain out of it until he looked like a wax figure. "But sir," he pleaded, "it is a misunderstanding. I can explain. The money is safe. No, please don't pull the funding. We have deals in the pipeline. If you pull out now, we go under." He listened for another moment. "But the ethics clause doesn't apply to family disputes," he argued, desperate now. Then he went silent. He lowered the phone slowly. He stared at the blank screen. The call had ended, and with it his career. In the world of high finance, reputation is currency. If investors think you will cheat your own dying father, they know you will cheat them without blinking. Julian wasn't just toxic, he was radioactive. The news program came back on air, but the tone had shifted completely. The sympathetic lighting was gone. The host was sitting up straight, holding a stack of papers. "Welcome back," she said briskly. "In light of the new evidence presented regarding the Coleman case, we have ended our interview with Julian and Paige Coleman." The camera panned out. The couch was empty. They had been escorted out of the building during the break. Not through the front door where the paparazzi were waiting, but through the back alley like the garbage they were. The host looked into the camera. "We also have an update on the GoFundMe campaign established for the couple. The platform has suspended the account pending an investigation into fraud. All donations are being refunded to the donors." She paused and her face softened. "To Raymond and Clara Coleman, if you are watching this, we hope you are safe, and we hope you find the peace you deserve." I turned off the TV. The silence in the hotel room was sweet. It was the sound of justice. It was the sound of a structure collapsing because the foundation was rotten. I looked at Clara. She was sitting on the balcony watching a seagull land on the railing. She didn't know about the hashtags. She didn't know about the investors. She just knew that the ocean was blue and the sun was warm. "Did the bad people go away?" Ray, she asked without turning around. "Yes, Clara," I said, walking out to stand beside her. "The bad people went away." She nodded. "Good. They were too loud." I put my arm around her. "They won't be loud anymore," I said. "They are going to be very quiet for a long time." But even as I said it, I knew it wasn't entirely true. Julian was down, but he wasn't out. I knew my son. I knew his desperation. When a rat is cornered, it doesn't surrender. It bites. He had lost the house. He had lost the money. He had lost his reputation. He had nothing left to lose. And a man with nothing left to lose is the most dangerous man on earth. He wouldn't come for me. He knew he couldn't touch me. I was too smart, too protected. He would come for the one thing I couldn't lock in a safe. I thought about Mia, my granddaughter, 10 years old, innocent. She was at a boarding school in Connecticut, a safe distance away from her parents' toxicity. But Julian was her father. He had rights, or at least he thought he did. My phone buzzed. It was Solomon. "You saw it?" he asked. "I saw it," I said. "It was beautiful." "It was a slaughter," Solomon said. "But Ray, we need to be careful." "I just got a call from the private investigator we hired to watch Julian." "What is he doing?" I asked. "He is at the airport," Solomon said. "He just bought a ticket." "To Miami?" I asked, feeling my muscles tense. "No," Solomon said. "To Connecticut." Connecticut. My blood ran cold. The warmth of the Miami sun vanished instantly. "He is going for Mia," I whispered. "He is desperate," Ray Solomon said. "He thinks if he gets the kid, he can use her as leverage. He knows she is your weak spot. He thinks if he holds her hostage, you will open the checkbook." I gripped the railing of the balcony so hard I thought the metal would bend. "He won't touch her," I snarled. "He is her father," Ray Solomon warned. "Until a court says otherwise, he has the right to pick her up from school." I looked at my watch. It was 2 o'clock. School got out at 3:30. He couldn't make it in time today, but he would be there tomorrow morning. "Get the jet ready, Solomon," I said. "The jet." "We are leaving Miami," I said. "We are going to Connecticut." "Ray, you can't just kidnap the kid," Solomon said. "That crosses a line." "I am not kidnapping her," I said. "I am saving her. You saw what they did to his mother. You think I am going to let him use my granddaughter as a bargaining chip?" I hung up the phone. I looked at Clara. "Pack your bag, Clara," I said. "Are we going on another trip?" she asked, smiling. "Yes," I said. "We are going to see Mia." Clara clapped her hands. "Oh, I miss Mia. Is she coming to play?" "We are going to get her," I said, "before the wolf gets to the door." I walked back into the room. I felt the familiar hum of adrenaline. The war wasn't over. It had just moved to a new battlefield. Julian thought he could use a child to fight his battles. He forgot that I was a bridge builder, and the most important job of a bridge is to carry the vulnerable safely over the dangerous water. I would burn every dollar I had left to keep that little girl safe. I grabbed my suitcase. "I am coming, Mia," I whispered. "And Grandpa is bringing the hammer." Desperation has a distinct odor. It smells like unwashed clothes and stale fast food, and the sharp metallic tang of adrenaline that comes when you have backed yourself into a corner with no exit. When Julian and Paige arrived in Connecticut, they were reeking of it. They drove a rented compact car because their luxury vehicles had been seized. They wore clothes that were wrinkled because they had been living out of suitcases. But they walked into the lobby of the prestigious St. Jude's boarding school with their heads held high, trying to wear their arrogance like armor. I was not there to see it happen, but I know exactly how it played out, because I know my granddaughter. Mia is 10 years old, going on 30. She has my eyes and her grandmother's intuition. She knows when a bridge is sturdy, and she knows when it is about to collapse. Julian signed her out at the front office. He was still her father. The court order stripping him of his assets did not strip him of his parental rights. Not yet. He smiled at the receptionist. He told her they were taking Mia for a surprise family weekend. The receptionist didn't know that the man standing in front of her was currently trending on Twitter as the most hated son in America. She just saw a father in a suit. Mia came running down the hallway with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders. She stopped when she saw them. She didn't run into their arms. She hesitated. She saw the dark circles under Julian's eyes. She saw the manic tightness in Paige's jaw. Children are like seismographs. They feel the earthquake before the ground starts shaking. "Hi, Dad," Mia said quietly. "Where is the Mercedes?" "It is in the shop, honey," Julian lied. "We got a rental. Come on. We are going on an adventure." They took her. They put her in the backseat of a car that smelled like cheap air freshener and drove her away from the only stability she had left. But they didn't go to a resort. They didn't go to a theme park. They drove to a roadside motel off the interstate, the kind of place where the neon sign flickers and the sheets are thin enough to read a newspaper through. I was sitting in a hotel room 10 miles away with Clara and Solomon when my phone buzzed. It wasn't a call. It was a notification from the family plan tracking app. Mia's iPhone is offline. My heart skipped a beat. They had taken her phone. They had cut the line. I tried calling her number, straight to voicemail. I tried calling Julian, blocked. I tried calling Paige, blocked. The silence was deafening. It was heavier than the concrete slabs I used to lift. It pressed down on my chest, making it hard to breathe. They had the one thing that mattered more to me than all the money in the world. Then the message arrived. It came from a burner number, a text message, short, brutal, transactional. "We have her. If you ever want to hear her voice again, wire $5 million to the crypto wallet below. You have 2 hours. If you call the police, she disappears. Do not test us, old man." I stared at the screen. I felt a coldness spread through my veins that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This wasn't just extortion. This was a declaration of war on the innocent. They were using a 10-year-old girl as a bargaining chip. They were terrified and broke, and they had decided that selling their own daughter back to her grandfather was their only way out. Clara looked at me. She saw the look on my face. She put down her knitting. "Is it Mia?" she asked softly. "Is she okay?" I put the phone down on the table. I covered her hand with mine. "She is scared, Clara," I said. "But she is going to be okay. Because we are going to get her back." Solomon stood up. He read the text message over my shoulder. He took off his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. "Kidnapping," he whispered. "Extortion. Ray, this is a federal crime. We call the FBI. They can have a tactical team at that motel in 20 minutes. I shook my head. "No, FBI," I said. "Ray, are you crazy?" Solomon asked. "They are threatening to make her disappear. They are cowards, Solomon," I said. "They won't hurt her physically. They need her. She is their golden ticket. But if we send in a SWAT team with flashbangs and assault rifles, we traumatize that little girl for life. I don't want her to see her father dragged out at gunpoint. I want to end this surgically." Then what Solomon asked. "You can't pay them. If you pay $5 million today, they will ask for $10 million next week. You teach them that Mia is a product for sale." I stood up and walked to the window. I looked out at the rain falling on the Connecticut streets. "I am not paying them a dime," I said. "I am going to bankrupt them morally." I turned back to Solomon. "Call the Department of Children and Families. Call Child Protective Services." "CPS," Solomon asked. "Ray, they move slow. They need an investigation. They move slow when they deal with hearsay," I said. "They move fast when there is imminent danger. And we are going to give them a dossier that proves imminent danger." I sat down at the desk. I opened my laptop. I started typing. "I am an engineer. I build cases like I build structures, layer by layer, fact by fact. Fact number 1, homelessness. Julian and Paige have no fixed address. They have been evicted. They are living in a motel. That is instability. Fact number 2. Financial ruin. They have zero assets and massive debts. They cannot provide food, shelter, or basic necessities for a child. Fact number 3. Flight risk. They have severed communication and are attempting to extort money to flee the country. But those were just the bricks. I needed the mortar. I needed the evidence that would make a social worker drop their coffee and call the police immediately. I pulled up the audio files. Recording number 3, the one where they talked about killing me, the one where Paige called her mother-in-law a burden. But there was another one, recording number 4. I had never played this one for anyone. It was recorded the night before I woke up. Julian and Paige were arguing in my hospital room. I hate that kid. Paige's voice hissed on the recording. Mia is so needy. She is always asking questions. Once we get the money, I am sending her to boarding school in Switzerland. I don't want to see her until she's 18. Fine, Julian replied, his voice slurred. Whatever. Just keep her quiet. If she cries one more time about missing her grandpa, I am going to lose it. I attached the file to the email. This proves emotional abuse, I said to Solomon. It proves they view her as an inconvenience, not a child. And combined with the text message demanding $5 million, it proves human trafficking. Solomon finished, his voice grim. They are essentially selling their custodial rights. I hit send. I sent it to the director of Connecticut CPS. Solomon made a call to a judge he knew in the district to expedite the review. We requested an emergency removal order. We requested immediate temporary custody be granted to the grandparents based on the evidence of criminal extortion and child endangerment. Then we waited. The minutes ticked by. 30 minutes, 45 minutes. My phone buzzed again. Another text from the burner number. 1 hour left, Dad. Don't be stupid. The clock is ticking. I didn't reply. I stared at the rain. I imagined Mia sitting on a dirty motel bed, clutching her backpack, wondering why her parents were acting so strange, wondering why she couldn't call me. Hold on, Mia, I whispered. Just hold on, baby girl. At the 50-minute mark, Solomon's phone rang. He answered it. He listened. He nodded. Thank you, Your Honor, he said. We are standing by. He hung up and looked at me. A fierce grin spread across his face. The judge signed it, Solomon said. Emergency order of protection. Custody is transferred to Raymond and Clara Coleman effective immediately. The police have been dispatched to the motel to execute the order. Civil police, I asked. Not SWAT. Just patrol officers, Solomon said, along with a social worker. They are going to serve the papers and remove the child. Let's go, I said, grabbing my coat. We drove to the motel. We parked across the street. We didn't want to interfere, but I needed to be there. I needed to see her safe. I saw the police cruisers pull up. No sirens, just silent authority. I saw the social worker, a woman with a kind face, walking purposefully toward room 112. I watched from the car window. The door opened. I saw Julian. He looked disheveled. He looked angry. He was shouting. He was waving his arms. Then the social worker held up the paperwork. The police officers stepped forward, their hands resting on their belts. Julian froze. He read the paper. I saw his shoulders slump. He turned back into the room. A moment later, Mia walked out. She looked small. She was holding her backpack against her chest like a shield. She looked terrified. Then she looked across the street. I rolled down my window. I waved. Her face lit up. Even from 50 yards away, I saw the relief wash over her. She broke into a run. She ran past the police officers. She ran past the social worker. She ran past her father, who was standing in the doorway looking like a man who had just lost his last betting chip. She ran across the street. I opened the car door and stepped out. I didn't care about the rain. I knelt down on the wet pavement. Mia collided with me. She buried her face in my neck. She was shaking. Grandpa, she sobbed. Grandpa, they took my phone. They said you were bad. They said we had to hide. I wrapped my arms around her. I held her tighter than I have ever held anything in my life. I smelled her shampoo. I felt her little heart beating like a trapped bird against my chest. I am here, Mia, I whispered into her hair. I am not bad, and nobody is hiding anymore. I looked up. Across the street, Julian was watching us. The police were talking to him. They were explaining that he was no longer a father in the eyes of the law. He was just a man who had tried to sell his daughter, and the sale had been declined. Paige came to the door. She saw Mia in my arms. She saw the police. She didn't run to her daughter. She turned around and went back inside the room, slamming the door. She gave up, just like that. Julian stood alone in the rain. He looked at me. I looked at him. There was no victory in his eyes, only a vast, empty defeat. I stood up, lifting Mia into my arms. She was getting too big to carry, but today she felt light as a feather. "Let's go home," I said to her. "Grandma is waiting." We got in the car. Solomon started the engine. As we drove away, I didn't look back at the motel. I looked at Mia. She was safe. The ransom had not been paid. But the price had been high. I had lost my son completely today. But looking at the little girl wiping tears from her cheeks, I knew I had saved the future. And that was a trade I would make 1,000 times over. There are two kinds of courts in this world. There's the court of public opinion, where Julian and Paige had tried to crucify me with hashtags and fake tears. They lost that case the moment the audio recordings hit the internet. Then there is the court of law. This is a colder, harder place. It does not care about your feelings. It does not care about your Instagram followers or how much you cry. It cares about facts. It cares about stability. And most of all, it cares about the best interests of the child. 3 days after I pulled Mia out of that roadside motel, we gathered for the emergency custody hearing. We did not go to the courthouse in Richmond. We were still in Connecticut, sitting in a conference room at a high-end law firm that Solomon had partnered with. The table was mahogany, the chairs were leather, and the air conditioning was set to a crisp 68 degrees. On the large monitor mounted on the wall was the virtual courtroom. The judge sat in the center square, a stern woman named Judge Patterson, who looked like she had heard every lie in the book twice. In the bottom left square was me and Clara. Clara was holding my hand, squeezing it rhythmically. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. She was my anchor. And in the bottom right square were Julian and Paige. The contrast was enough to end the case before it even started. Julian was sitting in what looked like a public library cubicle. The lighting was harsh fluorescent and the connection was grainy. He was wearing a shirt that looked slept in. His eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. Paige sat next to him looking like a ghost. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun and she was chewing on her thumbnail. The bailiff called the case to order. Emergency petition for temporary guardianship in the matter of Mia Coleman. Julian's lawyer spoke first. He was a court-appointed attorney, a young man who looked overworked and underprepared. He adjusted his tie and tried to sound confident. "Your Honor," he began, "my clients, Mr. and Mrs. Coleman, are loving, devoted parents. They are currently the victims of a targeted harassment campaign by the petitioner Raymond Coleman. Mr. Coleman has used his substantial wealth to financially cripple my clients and is now attempting to use that financial disparity to steal their daughter. The incident at the motel was not an abduction. It was a family vacation that was interrupted by a false police report filed by the grandfather." Julian nodded vigorously next to him, wiping a tear from his eye. Judge Patterson looked over her reading glasses at Julian. "Mr. Coleman," she said, "you claim this was a vacation. Is it standard practice for your family to vacation in a Motel 6 off the interstate while your child is supposed to be in school?" Julian leaned into the camera microphone. "Your Honor, we are in a transition period," he said, his voice trembling. "My father illegally evicted us from our home. We were traumatized. We took Mia away to protect her from the media circus my father created. We just wanted to be together as a family. We were looking for a new house, a safe house." He looked at me through the screen. His eyes were full of venom. "He is trying to buy her, Your Honor." Julian spat. "He thinks because he has millions of dollars he can just take whatever he wants. He took my house. He took my inheritance. Now he wants my little girl. Please don't let him do this. I love her. She is my world." It was a good performance. If I didn't know him better, I might have felt sorry for him. He played the underdog perfectly, the poor son crushed by the rich, tyrannical father. Judge Patterson turned her gaze to our square. "Mr. Coleman," she said, addressing me, "your response." Solomon stood up. He didn't use flowery language. He didn't raise his voice. He simply pressed a button on his laptop and shared his screen with the court. "Your Honor," Solomon said, "we are not here to discuss feelings. We are here to discuss physics. The physics of survival. A child needs shelter. A child needs food. A child needs stability." A document appeared on the screen. It was a financial affidavit. "This is a credit report for Julian and Paige Coleman generated this morning," Solomon said. "As you can see, they have 0 liquid assets. Their bank accounts are overdrawn, their credit cards are maxed out to the limit of $200,000. They have no employment, they have no fixed address. Solomon clicked to the next slide. It was the police report from the motel. When the officers arrived at the motel room to execute the protection order, they found no food in the room other than vending machine snacks. The child Mia Coleman was in distress. But most damning of all is this. Solomon played the audio file. Not the one where they insulted me. The new one. The voicemail Julian had left for a loan shark 3 days ago trying to secure a bridge loan using his daughter as collateral. I need the cash. Joey Julian's voice played through the courtroom speakers, tinny and desperate. I have the kid. My dad will pay. He will pay anything to get her back. I just need $5,000 to float us until the ransom wire comes through. It is a sure thing. The silence in the virtual courtroom was absolute. Julian went pale. He started shaking his head, mouthing, No, that's not real. Solomon stopped the recording. That, Your Honor, is not the voice of a loving father protecting his child, Solomon said. That is the voice of a man using his daughter as a winning lottery ticket. He is not looking for a home. He is looking for a payout. Judge Patterson's face hardened. She looked at Julian. Mr. Coleman, do you have a job? Julian stammered. I am an entrepreneur, Your Honor. I am in between ventures right now because of my father's interference. Do you have a lease on a property? The judge asked. We are looking, Julian said. We have prospects. So you are homeless, the judge stated flatly. You are unemployed, you are in significant debt, and there is evidence suggesting you intended to extort your father for the return of the child. She turned to me. Mr. Raymond Coleman, what is your proposal? I leaned forward. I looked into the camera. I didn't look at the judge. I looked at Julian. I don't want to buy her, Your Honor, I said, my voice deep and steady. You can't buy people, but you can provide for them. I held up a brochure. This is the St. Augustine Academy, I said. It is one of the best boarding schools in the country located here in Connecticut. It has 24-hour security. It has counselors. It has horses. Mia loves horses. I placed a receipt on the table. I have paid the full tuition for the next 4 years, I said. Room and board, books, uniforms, everything. She will be safe there. She will have friends. She will have structure. I looked at Clara. My wife and I will rent a house nearby, I continued. We will be there every weekend to take her to dinner, to help her with her homework, to be her family. We don't want to take her away from her parents forever. Your Honor, we just want to take her away from the chaos until her parents can learn to stand on their own 2 feet. Judge Patterson nodded slowly. She made some notes on her pad. The scratching of her pen was the only sound in the room. Then she looked up. The court finds that Mia Coleman is in immediate need of stability and protection, she ruled. The evidence presented regarding the parents' financial insolvency and the attempted extortion is credible and disturbing. She banged her gavel. Temporary custody is granted to the paternal grandparents Raymond and Clara Coleman. The child is to be enrolled in the St. Augustine Academy as proposed. Julian stood up in his cubicle. He knocked his chair over. No, he screamed. You can't do this. She is my daughter. You are stealing her. Sit down, Mr. Coleman, the judge barked. I am not finished, she continued. Mr. Coleman? Mrs. Coleman, you are granted supervised visitation rights once a month. However, this is contingent upon 2 conditions. First, you must provide proof of stable housing and employment. Second, you must pass a drug screening before every visit. Drug screening, Paige shrieked. We don't do drugs. This is insulting. The toxicity report from your father's soup says otherwise. Mrs. Coleman, the judge said coldly. Case closed. The screen went black. The connection was cut. I sat back in my chair. I let out a breath I felt like I had been holding for days. It was over. The law had spoken. Mia was safe. Clara leaned her head on my shoulder. We got her, Ray, she whispered. We got her, I said. We left the lawyer's office and drove to the house we were renting. It was a nice place, quiet, a big yard. Mia was waiting for us in the living room playing with a new set of Legos I had bought her. When we walked in, she looked up anxious. What happened? She asked. Do I have to go back to the motel? I sat down on the floor next to her. I picked up a blue Lego brick. No astronaut, I said. No more motels. I told her about the school. I told her about the horses. I told her about the library that looked like the one in Harry Potter. Her eyes got wide. And Mom and Dad, she asked. I took a deep breath. I didn't want to lie to her, but I didn't want to break her heart either. Mom and Dad have some work to do, I said. They have to fix their own house before they can take care of you, but you can write to them, and maybe when they get better they can come visit. Mia nodded. She didn't look sad. She looked relieved. She placed a yellow brick on top of the blue one. Grandpa, she said. Yeah, baby girl. Can we go get ice cream? She asked. I smiled. We can get all the ice cream you want, I said. That night after Mia was asleep in a bed with clean sheets and a locked door, I sat on the porch. The rain had stopped. The air was fresh. I thought about Julian. He was probably back in that motel room right now screaming at the walls. He was broke. He was defeated. He had tried to use his daughter as a weapon, and the weapon had misfired. He thought I was cruel. He thought I was punishing him. But I wasn't punishing him. I was freeing Mia. I had broken the cycle. The toxicity stopped here. The greed stopped here. Mia was going to grow up differently. She was going to grow up knowing that love isn't a transaction. She was going to know that family protects you, not sells you. I took a sip of my tea. You are welcome, Julian, I whispered to the night. I just did the one thing you couldn't do. I became a father. There is a legend in every family about where the patriarch keeps the real money. In my family, the rumor was that I didn't trust banks. Julian used to tell his friends that his crazy old man kept $1 million in gold bars buried under the floorboards of his workshop. He was half right. I didn't trust banks completely, and I did keep something very valuable in that old workshop. But it wasn't gold. It was something much heavier. 3 days after they lost the custody hearing, Julian and Paige were not just broke. They were starving. The kind of starvation that makes you hallucinate. They had been kicked out of the motel because their credit card was declined. They were sleeping in their rental car parked behind a Walmart. They had hit rock bottom, but instead of looking up, they decided to dig a little deeper. I knew they would come for the workshop. It was the only place left. It was an old corrugated metal building in the industrial district where I used to store my heavy equipment. It was dark. It was dirty. And to Julian, it was the X that marked the spot. I had security cameras installed there years ago. Motion activated. High definition. So when my phone buzzed at 2 a.m, I didn't panic. I poured myself a glass of water, sat down at my kitchen table in Connecticut, and opened the app. It was like watching a black and white movie about 2 rats trying to break into a pantry. They pulled up to the chain link fence. They didn't have bolt cutters, so they climbed over. Julian went first, tearing his suit pants on the barbed wire at the top. He fell onto the concrete on the other side and lay there for a minute, clutching his ankle. Paige followed. She was wearing designer sneakers that were now covered in mud. She dropped down beside him, not to help him, but to hiss at him to get up. They ran to the main door. It was locked with a heavy padlock. Julian picked up a piece of scrap metal, a rusted iron bar, and started hammering at the lock. Clang, clang, clang. The sound echoed through the empty lot. He hit it with the fury of a man who believes his salvation is on the other side of that door. He hit it until his hands blistered. Finally, the old hasp gave way. The lock fell to the ground. They slid the heavy rolling door up. It screeched, a sound of metal on metal that sounded like a scream. They stepped inside. The workshop smelled of diesel oil and dust. It was filled with shadows. Old tarps covered broken generators. Rusted tools hung on the walls like medieval torture devices. Julian pulled out a flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness. "Where is it?" Paige whispered, her voice echoing in the empty space. "You said he kept a safe here. You said he kept the gold here." "He did," Julian said frantically, sweeping the light back and forth. "I saw it once when I was a kid, a big iron safe, in the back office. He told me never to touch it. He said that is where the rainy day fund is." They ran to the back of the workshop. They kicked open the door to the small office where I used to do payroll. And there it was, the safe. It was a beast. A 1950s Mosler steel safe. It weighed 1,000 pounds. It sat in the corner covered in a layer of dust thick enough to write your name in. Julian dropped to his knees in front of it. He looked like he was worshipping an altar. "This is it," he breathed. "This is it, Paige. We are saved." He grabbed the dial. He spun it. Left, right, left. "Damn it," he cursed. "It is locked." "What is the combination?" Paige demanded, shining the light on the dial. "I don't know," Julian screamed. "I don't know." He stood up and looked around the room. He saw a heavy sledgehammer leaning against the wall. He grabbed it. "Stand back," he yelled. He swung the hammer. Boom! It hit the dial. Sparks flew. He swung again. And again. He was fueled by a manic strength. He was pounding on the door of his future, trying to force it open. It took him an hour of sweating and cursing and bleeding. Finally, the locking mechanism shattered. The handle hung loose. Julian dropped the hammer. He was panting. His shirt was soaked through. "Open it," Paige whispered. Julian grabbed the handle. He pulled. The heavy steel door groaned and swung open. They both leaned in. The flashlight beam illuminated the interior of the safe. They expected to see the glint of gold bars. They expected to see stacks of $100 bills wrapped in rubber bands. They expected salvation. But the safe was dark. There was no gold. There was no cash. There was only a single neat stack of papers sitting on the middle shelf. Julian froze. He blinked. He reached in and grabbed the stack. He pulled it out into the light. "What is that?" Paige asked, her voice rising in panic. "Where is the money, Julian?" Julian didn't answer. He was staring at the papers in his hands. He flipped through the first one, then the second, then the third. His knees gave out. He slid down the wall and sat on the dirty floor. "No," he whispered. "No, no, no." "What is it?" Paige screamed, grabbing the papers from his hand. She looked at them. The first page was a document from the Venetian Casino in Las Vegas. It was a promissory note for a gambling debt of $80,000. The second page was a statement from American Express. A delinquent balance of $55,000 passed to collections. The third page was a loan agreement from a private lender, a shark, $100,000 at 20% interest. "But look at the bottom page," Julian whispered, pointing a shaking finger at the document. "Look at the holder of the debt." Paige looked. At the bottom of every single page there was a stamp, a red ink stamp that read "sold and transferred." And underneath that stamp was the name of the new creditor, the Miller Heritage Trust. Julian looked up at the ceiling as if he could see me watching him. "He bought it," he whispered. "He bought the debt." I sat in my kitchen 300 miles away and took a sip of water. "Yes, son, I bought it. While you were plotting to put your mother in a nursing home, I was making phone calls. I knew about your gambling, Julian. I knew about the credit cards. I knew you were drowning. And I knew that when a man is drowning, he will grab onto anything to stay afloat. So I called your creditors. I called the casinos. I called the banks. I called the sharks. Debt is a commodity. It can be bought and sold just like corn or steel. And when a creditor knows a debtor is broke, they are happy to sell that debt for pennies on the dollar just to get it off their books. But I didn't buy it for pennies. I bought it at full price. I wanted to own every single cent of your mistakes." Julian flipped to the last page in the stack. It wasn't a legal document. It was a letter, handwritten on my personal stationery. Julian read it out loud. His voice broke with every word. "Dear Julian, you came here looking for gold, but the only thing you have ever earned in your life is debt. You thought you could run away from your mistakes. You thought you could declare bankruptcy and start over. But you can't run from me. I have purchased all of your outstanding liabilities. I am now your sole creditor. I own your gambling markers. I own your credit card balances. I own the personal loans you took out to buy things you didn't need. The total is $450,000. You might be wondering what the repayment terms are. Usually a bank would just garnish your wages or seize your assets. But you don't have any wages and I already took your assets. So here's the deal. I decide the interest rate. I decide the payment schedule. And if you miss a single payment, I will exercise my right to enforce the judgment. That means jail time for fraud. That means you will never borrow a dime from anyone ever again. There is no gold in this safe, son. There is only the weight of your own choices. Carry it. Love, Dad." Julian dropped the letter. It fluttered to the floor, settling in the dust next to his torn shoe. He looked at Paige. "He owns us," he whispered. "He literally owns us. We can't file for bankruptcy because he will contest it. We can't run because he will find us. We are slaves, Paige. We are working for him now." Paige didn't scream this time. She didn't hit him. She just stared at the open safe, the empty black hole that represented their future. She realized then that there was no bottom to this pit. Every time they thought they hit the floor, I pulled a lever and dropped them another 10 feet. She stood up. She dusted off her pants. "I am done," she said quietly. "What?" Julian asked. "I am done with you," she said. "I married a rich man. I stuck around for a broke man. But I am not sticking around for a man who is owned by his father." She turned and walked toward the open door. "Paige, wait!" Julian cried, scrambling to get up. "Where are you going?" "Away," Paige said without looking back. "I am going to find a lawyer. I am going to cut a deal." She walked out into the night, leaving him alone in the dark workshop. Julian sat there surrounded by the evidence of his failures. He looked at the safe. He looked at the papers. He started to laugh. It was a broken, jagged sound that bounced off the metal walls. He had come for treasure. He had found chains. I watched him on the screen for a few more minutes. I watched him curl up on the concrete floor, clutching the letter to his chest. He looked small. He looked like the little boy who used to hide in the closet when thunderstorms rolled in. But I didn't feel the urge to go comfort him. Not this time. The storm was here, and for the first time in his life, he was going to have to get wet. I closed the app. I turned off the light in my kitchen. The trap was sprung. The cage was locked. I went back to bed. Clara was sleeping soundly. I pulled the covers up. Tomorrow was going to be a busy day. I had a garden to plant with Mia, and Julian had a lot of dishes to wash if he wanted to start paying off that $400,000. Interest was accruing every second. They say that when you strip a man of his dignity, he has two choices. He can stand up and rebuild himself from the ashes, or he can lay down and let the wind blow him away. Julian Coleman was about to find out which kind of man he was. It was 10 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. The sky was a bruised gray color, threatening rain, but never quite delivering it. Julian and Paige were standing in the parking lot of a high-end pawn shop in downtown Richmond. They looked like refugees from a fashion show that had gone terribly wrong. Julian was wearing his wrinkled suit, the one he had climbed the fence with. Paige was wearing her designer sneakers that were now caked in dried mud from the salvage yard. They were there to sell the last things they owned. Julian was clutching his wrist. On it sat a Rolex Daytona. It was a beautiful watch, stainless steel and ceramic bezel. I had given it to him when he graduated college. He loved that watch more than he loved most people. He used to polish it every night. He used to hold his arm up at dinner parties just so the light would catch the face. Paige was holding her wedding ring, a 3-carat diamond solitaire. It was the ring Julian had bought with my money years ago. They walked toward the pawn shop door. They were arguing. "We should ask for $20,000, Julian hissed. "The watch alone is worth $30. Just get what you can." Paige snapped. "I am hungry, Julian. I haven't eaten a real meal in 2 days. Just sell the damn thing so we can get a hotel room and figure this out." They reached for the door handle. But before they could open it, a truck pulled into the parking lot. It wasn't a customer. It was a flatbed tow truck. It was big and loud and smelled of diesel fumes. It pulled up right behind the rental car Julian and Paige had been using. The driver jumped out. He was a big man with a clipboard. He didn't look at the rental car. He looked at Julian. "Are you Julian Coleman?" he asked. Julian clutched his wrist protectively. "Yes." "Who are you?" The man checked his clipboard. "I am here for the assets," he said. "What assets?" Julian asked, stepping back. "We don't have anything left. My father took the house. He took the accounts. Leave us alone." The driver shook his head. "I am not here for the house, Mr. Coleman. I have a writ of execution here authorized by your primary creditor." He pointed a thick finger at Julian's wrist. "The watch," he said. Julian froze. He covered the Rolex with his other hand. "No," he whispered. "No way. This is a gift. It is personal property. You can't take this." The driver held up the paper. "According to the judgment filed this morning by the Miller Heritage Trust, all personal liquid assets are subject to immediate seizure to satisfy the outstanding debt of $450,000. The watch is listed by serial number." He looked at Paige. "And the ring, ma'am." Paige gasped. She curled her hand into a fist. "This is my wedding ring," she screamed. "It is sentimental." The driver shrugged. "It is a diamond, ma'am, and it was purchased with funds that are now subject to the lien. Hand it over or I call the police and we do this the hard way." Julian looked at the driver. He looked at the pawn shop door just 10 feet away. He realized he had been seconds away from cash, seconds away from a meal, and I had snatched it away at the finish line. He didn't fight. He didn't have the fight left in him. Slowly, painfully, he unclasped the watch. He felt the weight of it leave his wrist. It felt like he was cutting off a hand. He handed it to the driver. "Take it," he whispered. "Just take it." Paige was crying. She pulled the ring off her finger. She threw it at the driver. It hit his chest and fell to the asphalt. "I hate you," she screamed at the sky. "I hate you, Ray Coleman." The driver picked up the ring. He put the watch and the ring into an evidence bag. "Thank you, folks," he said. "That knocks about $30,000 off the debt, only $420,000 to go." He turned to get back in his truck. "Wait," Julian said. "You are blocking our car. We need to leave." The driver stopped. He looked at the rental car, then he looked at his clipboard again. "Oh, that reminds me," he said. He walked over to the rental car. He pulled a device out of his pocket. He scanned the barcode on the windshield. "This vehicle was rented using a credit card ending in 4598, correct?" "Yes," Julian said. "So what?" "That card has been reported for fraud and delinquency," the driver said. "The rental company has authorized a repossession." He walked to the back of the truck and lowered the hook. "No," Julian screamed, running toward the car. "No, you can't. Our suitcases are in there. Our clothes." "It is raining." The driver ignored him. He hooked up the car. He pressed a lever. The winch whined. The car lifted off the ground. Julian grabbed the door handle, trying to open it, trying to get his bag out. "Let it go, son," the driver warned, "unless you want to get towed to the impound lot with it." Julian let go. He stepped back. He watched as his last mode of transportation, his last shelter, was hoisted into the air. The driver climbed into the cab. He started the engine. "Have a nice day, folks," he said. The truck rumbled out of the parking lot, carrying the watch, the ring, and the car. Silence descended on the asphalt. Julian stood there. He was wearing a dirty suit. He had no phone because the service had been cut off an hour ago. He had no watch. He had no car. He had no money. He turned to look at Paige. He expected to see her crying. He expected to see her angry. He expected to see his partner in crime ready to scheme their way out of this. But Paige wasn't crying anymore. She was standing very still. Her face was dry. Her eyes were cold. She was looking at Julian like he was a stranger she had just met at a bus stop and didn't particularly like. "Paige," Julian said, his voice trembling. "Paige, what do? We have to call someone. Maybe your parents. Maybe we can—" Paige laughed. It was a short, sharp sound like glass breaking. "My parents," she asked. "My parents told me not to marry you, Julian. They said you were a spoiled brat with no ambition. They said you were riding your father's coattails." She shook her head. "I defended you. I told them you were a visionary. I told them you were going to be richer than your father ever was." She looked him up and down. She looked at his torn pants. She looked at his empty wrist. "God, was I wrong?" she whispered. "Paige, don't talk like that," Julian pleaded, reaching for her hand. "We are a team. We can fix this. We just need to—" "Don't touch me," she snapped, pulling her hand away. "There is no we, Julian. Not anymore." She reached into her pocket. She pulled out a piece of paper. It was wrinkled. It was damp. "What is that?" Julian asked. Paige unfolded it. "I went to see a lawyer yesterday," she said. "While you were crying in the motel room, I went to see a divorce attorney." "Divorce," Julian whispered. The word hit him harder than the loss of the money. "Divorce. You can't. Not now." "Especially now," Paige said. She held up the paper. "The lawyer said something very interesting, Julian. He said that debt is usually shared in a marriage. But he said that if I can prove that the debt was incurred through fraud or criminal activity by one spouse without the other spouse's knowledge, I might be able to wash my hands of it." She smiled a cruel, thin smile. "I am going to testify, Julian. I am going to tell the court that you gambled the money. I am going to tell them you tricked me into signing those loans. I am going to tell them that I was a victim of your financial abuse." "That is a lie," Julian screamed. "You spent the money too. You bought the purses. You wanted the penthouse." "Prove it," Paige said. She looked around the empty parking lot. "You have no records. You have no lawyer. You have no credibility. You are a man who tried to extort his own father and got caught. The world hates you, Julian. And frankly, so do I." She turned her back on him. She walked toward the street. "Where are you going?" Julian yelled. "Paige, come back. You can't leave me here. I have nothing." Paige stopped. She looked over her shoulder. "You have your debt," she said. She raised her hand. A taxi that was driving by slowed down. She must have hidden a $20 bill somewhere because she opened the door and got in. She didn't look back as the taxi pulled away. Julian stood alone in the center of the parking lot. The wind picked up. It started to rain. Cold, gray drops that soaked into his ruined suit. He looked around. There was nobody there. No audience. No friends. No wife. No car. He looked down at his wrist. There was a tan line where the Rolex used to be. A pale strip of skin that marked the ghost of his former life. He realized then that I hadn't just taken his money. I had taken his shield. For 38 years he had used money to protect himself from the world. He had used my name as a password to open doors. He had used his wife as a mirror to admire himself. Now the shield was gone. The password was expired. The mirror was broken. He was just a man standing in the rain. A bubble of panic rose in his chest. It started as a whimper and grew into a roar. He felt small. He felt terrified. He felt the crushing weight of the $450,000 stone I had tied around his neck. "Dad," he whispered. The word was lost in the sound of the traffic. He looked up at the sky. He imagined me sitting somewhere dry and warm watching him. "Dad," he screamed louder. He fell to his knees on the wet asphalt. He didn't care about his pants anymore. He didn't care about his dignity. "Dad, help me." He screamed my name over and over again until his voice cracked. He screamed until his throat bled. He screamed for the father he had tried to kill. He screamed for the savior he had rejected. But nobody came. The rain kept falling. The cars kept driving by. The world kept turning. I was sitting in my study in Connecticut monitoring the GPS tracker on the rental car. I saw it moving toward the impound lot. I knew the job was done. I took off my glasses and rubbed my eyes. I heard his scream, not with my ears but with my heart. I felt the vibration of his pain. It hurt me. Of course it hurt me. No father wants to see his son on his knees in a parking lot. No father wants to see his child broken. But I sat still. I didn't pick up the phone. I didn't call a lawyer to bail him out. I didn't send a car to pick him up. Because sometimes the only way to save a man from drowning is to let him hit the bottom so he has something solid to push off of. Julian was at the bottom now. The question was whether he would stay there and drown or if he would finally learn how to swim. I closed my laptop. "Swim, son," I whispered to the empty room. "For God's sake, swim." The air in the Caribbean tastes different than the air in Virginia. In Richmond, the air always tasted of asphalt and pollen and old money that had gone stale. Here on this little island off the coast of Turks and Caicos, the air tastes of salt and hibiscus, and something that feels a lot like redemption. It has been 3 months since the parking lot incident. 3 months since I watched my son's life get towed away on a flatbed truck. 3 months since I bought 2 one-way tickets and disappeared for good. We are staying in a private villa that sits on a cliff overlooking a bay so blue it looks like someone spilled ink into the ocean. It is expensive. It costs more a week than Julian used to make in a month. But I do not care about the cost. I spent 40 years saving money for a rainy day. Well, it rained. It poured. And now I am buying the sunshine. I sat on the terrace with a leather-bound journal on my lap. The sun was beginning its slow descent into the water, painting the sky in streaks of violet and gold. The only sound was the rhythmic shushing of the waves against the rocks below and the faint melody of a jazz record playing from inside the house. Etta James. At last. I looked up from my writing. Clara was standing by the railing. She was wearing a loose white linen dress that caught the breeze. Her hair, which used to be pulled back in a tight bun, was loose and flowing silver in the wind. She wasn't wringing her hands anymore. She wasn't looking over her shoulder waiting for Paige to yell at her. She was holding a glass of iced tea, and she was swaying gently to the music. The doctors in Richmond had told me that Clara's dementia was aggressive. They said the stress of her environment was accelerating the decline. They said she would be nonverbal within a year. They were wrong. They didn't account for the power of peace. Since we arrived here, the fog in Clara's mind hasn't vanished, but it has thinned. It is like a morning mist now instead of a heavy storm. She forgets things, yes. She forgets where she put her sunglasses. She forgets what day of the week it is. But she remembers the important things. She remembers how to laugh. She remembers how to dance. And most importantly, she remembers that she is safe. She turned and saw me watching her. A smile spread across her face. It was a genuine smile, the kind that reaches the eyes and makes them crinkle at the corners. "Ray," she called out, "come here. They are playing our song." I put the pen down. I closed the journal. I walked over to her. My legs felt strong. The limp I had carried for years seemed to have evaporated in the tropical heat. I took her hand. It was warm. It wasn't shaking. "May I have this dance, Mrs. Coleman?" I asked. "You may, Mr. Coleman," she said, dipping her head like a southern belle. "But watch your feet. I am wearing sandals." I pulled her close. We moved together on the cool stone of the terrace. We didn't do anything fancy, just a slow, rhythmic sway. My hand on her waist, her head on my chest. I smelled her hair. It smelled of coconut and ocean breeze. It didn't smell of fear anymore. "Do you know where we are, Ray?" she asked softly into my shirt. "We are on an island, Clara," I said. "We are on vacation." She hummed a little note. "It is a long vacation," she said. "The longest," I said. She pulled back and looked at me. Her eyes were clear brown pools of trust. "Are we going back?" she asked. The question hung in the air. For a second I felt a flicker of the old tension, but I looked at her. I looked at the peace in her face. "No, Clara," I said firmly. "We are never going back. We sold the house, remember?" She thought for a moment. Her brow furrowed, then smoothed out. "Oh yes," she said. "The big house." "I didn't like that house, Ray. It was too loud, and the stairs were too steep." She rested her head back on my chest. "I like this house better. It is quiet, and the nice man brings me mangoes in the morning." The nice man was Eduardo, our chef. He treated Clara like a queen. He didn't lock her in a room. He sat with her and peeled fruit and listened to her stories about her childhood, even if she told the same story 3 times in a row. I held her tighter. This is what I fought for. This moment, right here. I thought about Julian. I couldn't help it. A father never truly stops thinking about his son, even when that son is a stranger. I wondered where he was at this exact moment, probably washing dishes at Tony's diner, probably standing in a cloud of steam, his hands raw and red, scraping half-eaten burgers off plates. I wondered if he was angry. I wondered if he was hungry. But as I held my wife, as I felt her heart beating calmly against mine, I realized something that shocked me. I didn't feel guilty. For weeks I had waited for the guilt to come. I had waited to wake up in the middle of the night, sweating, feeling like a monster for disowning my own flesh and blood. I expected the ghost of my fatherly duty to haunt me. But the ghost never came. Instead, I felt a profound sense of balance. I looked over at the journal sitting on the chair. I had been writing an entry just before Clara called me. I knew exactly what I had written. October 24th. The sunset is beautiful tonight. Clara laughed at breakfast today. She actually laughed a belly laugh because a lizard ran across the patio. I haven't heard that sound in 5 years. I spent my whole life building bridges to connect things, but sometimes the most important engineering feat is demolition. You have to blow up the bridge to stop the enemy from crossing. I blew up the bridge to Julian. I cut off the supply line. And because I did that, the enemy cannot reach us. My wife is alive, my granddaughter is safe at school, and I am standing here breathing. People will say I am cold. They will say I am ruthless. Let them say it. They didn't sit in that hospital room and listen to their son plan their death. They didn't see their wife drinking water from a bathroom tap because she was locked in a guest room. I chose. I chose the woman who built a life with me over the man who wanted to sell it, and I would make that choice again every single day of the week. The song ended. The needle lifted off the record. Clara sighed contentedly. "My feet are tired, Ray," she said. "Let's sit down," I said. I led her to the lounge chairs. I poured her more tea. She took a sip and looked out at the horizon where the sun was just a sliver of fire dipping into the sea. "Ray," she said. "Yes, Clara. Where is the boy?" I froze. She hadn't asked about Julian in weeks. "Which boy, Clara?" I asked carefully. "The loud one," she said. "The one who was always asking for money. The one with the nervous eyes." "Julian," I said. "Yes, Julian," she said, testing the name. "He isn't here, is he?" "No, Clara," I said. "He is back in Virginia. He has a job now. He is working." Clara nodded slowly, processing this information. "That is good," she said. "He needed a job. He never finished anything, Ray. Remember the treehouse you built him? He never painted it. He just wanted to sit in it." She looked at me with a lucid intensity that pierced right through me. "You did the right thing, Ray." I stared at her. "What did you say?" "You did the right thing," she repeated. "You stopped giving him the candy. If you give a child too much candy, his teeth rot. Julian's soul was rotting, Ray. You had to stop." She patted my hand. "Don't be sad about it. You saved him from himself." I felt a lump in my throat. Even in her confusion, even through the fog of dementia, she understood the fundamental truth that Julian had missed. She understood that saying no was an act of love. "Thank you, Clara," I whispered. We sat in silence as the stars began to come out. They were brighter here than anywhere else. Without the city lights polluting the sky, the Milky Way looked like a river of diamond dust. My phone buzzed on the table. I picked it up. It was a video call request. "Mia," I smiled. I accepted the call. Mia's face filled the screen. She was wearing her school uniform, a blazer with the St. Augustine crest. She was sitting in her dorm room, which was decorated with posters of horses. "Hi, Grandpa. Hi, Grandma," she chirped. "Hi, baby girl," I said. "How was school?" "It was awesome," Mia said. "I got an A on my history test. And guess what? I learned how to ride English saddle today. The instructor said I have natural balance. That is the Coleman blood," I said. "We are builders. We understand balance." "Look," Grandma Mia said, holding up a drawing. "I drew this for you. It is a palm tree." Clara leaned in close to the phone, squinting. "It is beautiful, Mia," she said. "It looks just like the ones here. When are you coming to see us?" "Thanksgiving." "Grandpa," said Mia answered. "He is sending the plane for me." "That is right," I said. 1 month astronaut. You and me and Grandma and the beach is Dad coming?" Mia asked quietly. I looked at her. I didn't lie. "No, Mia," I said. "Dad has to work. He has a lot of debt to pay off. He is learning how to be responsible." Mia nodded. She didn't look sad. She looked accepting. "Okay," she said. "Tell him I said good luck." "I will," I said. We talked for a few more minutes, then she had to go study. I hung up the phone. I looked at Clara. She was dozing off in the chair. I picked up my journal again. I uncapped the pen. I wrote one last line for the day. The foundation is settled. The cracks are repaired. The house is standing. I closed the book. I stood up and walked to the edge of the terrace. I breathed in the salt air. I was Raymond Coleman. I was a husband. I was a grandfather. And for the first time in a long time, I was a free man. I raised my glass to the moon. To the builders I whispered, and to the strength to tear it down when it goes wrong. I took a sip. It tasted like victory. Time is a funny architect. It takes years to build a reputation and seconds to demolish it, but it takes a lifetime to rebuild a human soul from the rubble. 1 year had passed since the day I watched my son scream for me in a rainy parking lot. 1 year of silence. 1 year of peace. I had come back to the States alone. Clara stayed on the island. She was happy there watching the hummingbirds and forgetting the names of the people who had hurt her. I came back because Mia had a birthday, and a video call is not the same thing as a hug. I wanted to see how tall she had grown. I wanted to see if the light in her eyes was still there. It was. She was 11 now, taller, smarter. She walked with a confidence that made my chest swell. We had spent the morning at the aquarium, and now she wanted to see a movie. Some superhero blockbuster where the good guys win and the bad guys go to jail. Life is rarely that simple, but for 2 hours in a dark theater, we could pretend it was. The theater was one of those old, restored palaces downtown, the kind with velvet ropes and the smell of real buttered popcorn. It was raining outside, a cold, gray drizzle that reminded me of the day I left. We walked into the lobby. It was crowded, teenagers on dates, families trying to wrangle toddlers. The noise was a dull roar of excitement. Mia was holding my hand. She didn't pull away, even though she was getting to that age where holding your grandfather's hand isn't cool. She pointed at the concession stand. "Can we get the big bucket, Grandpa?" she asked. "We can get the bucket and the candy," I said. I bought the tickets at the kiosk. I didn't want to talk to anyone. I just wanted to get in, sit down, and disappear into the story. We walked toward the entrance of the auditorium. There was a podium there. A staff member was standing behind it, scanning tickets. He was wearing a purple vest that was a little too tight around the shoulders and a name tag that hung crookedly on his chest. He was looking down at a scanner in his hand, moving with the mechanical exhaustion of someone who has done the same motion 1,000 times today. "Ticket, please," he mumbled, without looking up. I froze. I knew that voice. It wasn't the booming, arrogant voice of the man who used to yell at waiters for bringing the wrong wine. It wasn't the desperate, screaming voice of the man in the parking lot. It was a flat, hollow voice. The voice of a man who has been ground down by the friction of survival. I stopped. Mia stopped beside me. "Come on, Grandpa," she said, tugging my arm. "The movie is starting." I didn't move. I looked at the man in the purple vest. He was thinner. His hair, the hair he used to spend $200 a month styling, was gray at the temples and cut short in a cheap barbershop style. His face was lined. He looked 10 years older than the last time I saw him.
He had circles under his eyes that spoke of double shifts and sleeping in bad beds. He was checking the tickets of the couple in front of us. He tore the stubs. He pointed to the left. "Enjoy the show," he said robotically. Then he turned to me. "Ticket pull." The words died in his throat. He looked up. He saw the boots first. My leather work boots, then the jeans, then the jacket, then the face. Julian stopped breathing. I saw the reaction ripple through his body. It was like watching a deer realize it has walked into a clearing with a wolf. His eyes went wide. His hand holding the scanner trembled. He took a half step back, almost knocking over the podium. He looked at me. Then he looked at Mia. Mia didn't recognize him at first. She hadn't seen him in a year. And this man in the uniform didn't look like the father she remembered. The father she remembered wore suits and smelled of cologne. This man smelled of artificial butter and cleaning spray. Then she saw his eyes. "Dad," she whispered. Julian flinched. The sound of his name seemed to hit him like a physical blow. I watched him. I waited for the old Julian to appear. I waited for the anger. I waited for him to puff up his chest and start shouting about how I stole his life. I waited for him to beg. I waited for him to ask for money or a ride or a lawyer. But the old Julian wasn't there. The old Julian had died in that parking lot. The man standing in front of me was ashamed. His face turned a deep crimson. He couldn't hold my gaze. He looked down. He stared at his cheap black shoes. He hunched his shoulders, trying to make himself smaller, trying to disappear inside that purple vest. He looked like he wanted the floor to open up and swallow him whole. He didn't say a word. He didn't try to touch Mia. He didn't try to explain. He just stood there paralyzed by the weight of his own reality, colliding with the life he had thrown away. I looked at his hands. They were rough. The manicured fingernails were gone. There were calluses on his palms, a burn mark on his thumb, probably from a hot popcorn kettle. They were working hands. For the first time in his 39 years, my son had the hands of a man who earned his bread. I felt a strange sensation in my chest. It wasn't pity. Pity is cheap. Pity looks down on people. This wasn't pity. It was respect. A grudging, hard-won respect. He hadn't curled up and died. He hadn't gone to prison. He had gotten a job. A humble job. A hard job. But a job. He was standing on his own 2 feet. Mia looked at me. She looked scared. She didn't know what to do. I squeezed her hand. "Give him the ticket, Mia," I said softly. Mia reached out. Her hand was shaking a little. She held the paper ticket out to him. Julian looked at the ticket. He looked at his daughter's hand. He took a shaky breath. He reached out. His hand touched hers for a split second. I saw him close his eyes briefly, savoring the contact. He took the ticket. He scanned it. Beep. He didn't tear it. He handed it back to her. He didn't trust his voice to speak. He just nodded. Then he looked at me. He held out his hand for my ticket. He still didn't look me in the eye. He looked at my chin. I reached into my pocket. I didn't pull out the ticket. I pulled out my money clip. I peeled off a single bill, a crisp $100 bill. Benjamin Franklin looked back at me, stern and serious. I held it out to him. Julian saw the money. He froze. He looked up at me then. His eyes were filled with confusion and a flicker of the old pride. Was I mocking him? Was I buying him off? He shook his head slightly. "I can't," he whispered. His voice was barely audible over the noise of the lobby. I didn't pull the money back. I stepped closer. "Take it," I said. Julian looked at the people in line behind me. He looked at his manager, who was watching from the concession stand. He was terrified of making a scene. He was terrified of losing this job. I took his hand. It was cold. I pressed the bill into his palm and closed his fingers around it. "It isn't a gift, Julian," I said. My voice was low just for him. He looked at me confused. "Then what is it?" he asked. "It is a tip," I said, "for doing the job." I looked him straight in the eye. I wanted him to understand. "You are showing up," I said. "You are standing here. You are working. That is worth something." I let go of his hand. "Keep the change," I said. Julian looked down at the money in his hand. He looked at it like it was a holy relic. It wasn't millions. It wasn't a trust fund. It was $100. But in that moment, it was the most valuable money he had ever held because it was the first money that came with a lesson attached. He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed. "Thank you," he whispered. He didn't say Dad. He just said thank you. I nodded. I handed him my ticket. He scanned it.
Beep. Enjoy the movie, he said. His voice was stronger this time, not arrogant, just steady. I turned to Mia. Let's go astronaut, I said. We walked past him into the dark hallway leading to Theater 4. Mia looked back once. I didn't. I kept walking. Grandpa, she whispered when we were in the dark. That was Dad. Yeah, I said. That was him. Why is he working here? She asked. Because he has to, I said. Is he poor? She asked. I thought about it. I thought about the man I had just seen. A man stripped of his vanity. A man learning the value of $1 the hard way. A man who felt shame, which meant he finally had a conscience. No, Mia, I said as we found our seats. He isn't poor. He is just starting over. And starting over is the hardest work there is. I sat down in the plush seat. The screen lit up. The trailers began to play. Loud explosions and dramatic music filled the room, but my mind was back in the lobby. I touched the empty spot in my pocket where the $100 used to be. I didn't regret giving it to him, and I didn't regret walking away. He was climbing the mountain now. He was at the very bottom, looking up at a peak that seemed miles away. But he was climbing, and for the first time in his life, he was doing it without a safety rope. If he made it to the top, if he truly rebuilt himself, maybe one day we could talk. Maybe one day he could come to the island. But not yet. He had a lot of tickets to tear before he earned that view. I put my arm around Mia. She leaned her head on my shoulder. Here comes the hero, she whispered, pointing at the screen. I smiled in the darkness. Yeah, I thought. But real heroes don't wear capes. They wear purple vests and stand on their feet for 8 hours a day trying to salvage their dignity. I watched the movie. And for the first time in a year, I didn't worry about my son. He was going to be all right. He was finally learning the one thing I couldn't teach him with a checkbook. He was learning how to be a man. The ink on the documents was still wet when I set the pen down on the mahogany desk. Outside the window of our villa, the Caribbean sun was beginning its slow descent into the turquoise water, painting the sky in strokes of violent orange and soft purple. It was the kind of sunset that makes you believe in God, or at least in the idea that there is some order to this chaotic universe. I looked down at the stack of papers in front of me. It was done. The final piece of the puzzle. The last beam in the structure I had been building for the past year. It was the Mia Coleman Trust. Solomon had argued with me about the terms. He said they were too strict. He said I was trying to rule from the grave. He said Mia might resent me for it when she turned 18 and realized she couldn't touch a dime of her grandfather's millions. Let her resent me, I had told him. Resentment is better than ruin. I would rather she hate me and have a career than love me and end up in a parking lot screaming for help like her father. I picked up the document and read the clauses one last time. Clause 1, the beneficiary. Mia Coleman shall not receive any distribution of principal or interest until she reaches the age of 30. 30, not 18, not 21. 30. By 30, you have made mistakes. You have had your heart broken. You have held a job you hated. You have learned that the world does not owe you a living. 30 is the age when you stop being a child and start being a person. Clause 2. To be eligible for distribution, the beneficiary must provide proof of gainful full-time employment for a consecutive period of 5 years. I smiled at that one. No trust fund babies. No influencers. No life coaches. She had to work. She had to answer to a boss. She had to know what it felt like to earn a paycheck that barely covered the rent, because that is the only way to understand the value of the money I was leaving her. And then there was Clause 3, the Julian Clause. Clause 3. The trustee shall have the absolute discretion to withhold all distributions if there is evidence that the funds are being used to support debts or liabilities incurred by the beneficiary's parents, Julian or Paige Coleman. It was cruel, perhaps, to cut them out so completely, to ensure that Mia could not become their ATM machine in the future. But it was necessary. I knew my son. I knew his nature. If he smelled money, he would come sniffing. He would guilt her. He would manipulate her. He would drain her dry just like he tried to drain me. I was building a wall around her financial future, a wall high enough to keep the wolves out even if the wolves were her own parents. I folded the document and placed it in the envelope. I sealed it with wax. It is for you, astronaut, I whispered. It is a ladder, not an elevator. You have to climb it yourself. I stood up and walked out of the study. The house was quiet. The only sound was the rhythmic shushing of the ocean against the cliffs below and the gentle hum of the ceiling fans. I walked into the master bedroom. The curtains were drawn, blowing slightly in the trade winds. The room smelled of lavender and sea salt. Clara was asleep. She was lying on her side, her silver hair spread out over the white pillowcase like a halo. Her breathing was deep and even. Her face was relaxed. The lines of worry that had etched themselves into her forehead back in Richmond were gone, smoothed away by months of peace and kindness. I walked over to the bed and sat down in the chair I kept there. I did this every night. I sat and watched her sleep. It was my meditation. It was my prayer. I looked at her hands resting on the duvet. They were gnarled with arthritis, but they were beautiful to me. On her left ring finger sat the simple gold band I had placed there 45 years ago. It wasn't the big diamond Paige had thrown at the tow truck driver. It was a $20 band we bought at a pawn shop when we were kids, but it had outlasted everything. I reached out and covered her hand with mine. She didn't wake up. She just sighed a happy, content sound and shifted slightly toward my touch. I thought about the hospital room. I closed my eyes and I was back there. The smell of antiseptic, the beep of the monitor, the feeling of being trapped in my own body, unable to scream while my son and his wife stood over me plotting. Shady Acres. That was the name that had started the war. Shady Acres. A warehouse for the forgotten. A place where they tied old people to chairs and let them sit in their own filth. That was where they wanted to put her. That was the future they had planned for the woman who had knit their sweaters and baked their birthday cakes. I looked at Clara now, safe in a silk sheet on a private island. I saved her. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow. I saved her. I didn't save my legacy in the traditional sense. The Coleman name wouldn't be on any new skyscrapers in Virginia. My son wouldn't carry on the business. The mansion was gone. The cars were gone. But this woman was safe. She would never know the smell of urine in a state ward. She would never know the fear of being yelled at by an overworked orderly. She would never be thirsty and unable to ask for water. She would die here, hopefully many years from now. She would die in a bed that smelled of flowers, holding the hand of the man who loved her, listening to the ocean. And if the price for that peace was my relationship with my son, then it was a bargain. I thought about Julian. I thought about him tearing tickets in that movie theater. I thought about the $100 bill I had put in his hand. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate takes energy, and I was too old to waste energy on things that didn't grow. I felt a distant sadness for him, like you feel for a character in a tragedy who refuses to learn his lesson until the final act. He was living the life he had earned, and I was living the life I had built. We were miles apart, worlds apart, and maybe that is how it was meant to be. Some branches on the family tree are rotten, and if you don't prune them, they kill the whole tree. I had pruned the branch. It hurt. It left a scar. But the tree was still standing. I looked at Clara's face again. She smiled in her sleep, dreaming of something pleasant. Maybe she was dreaming of the garden we planted. Maybe she was dreaming of Mia. I squeezed her hand 3 times. 1, 2, 3. I love you. I leaned back in the chair. The room was getting darker, but I didn't turn on the lamp. I liked the twilight. I thought about the vow we made standing at the altar in a small Baptist church half a century ago, for richer or for poorer, in sickness and in health, till death do us part. Most people say those words because they are part of the script. They don't know what they weigh. They don't know that sickness isn't just a cold, it is dementia that steals the person you love day by day. They don't know that poorer isn't just missing a paycheck, it is having your own blood try to rob you. But I knew, and I had kept the vow. I looked at the window where the first star was appearing in the indigo sky. You did good. Ray, I whispered to the empty room. You didn't build a monument of stone. You didn't build a dynasty. You built a fortress around the person you loved, and that is enough. I closed my eyes and listened to the rhythm of my wife's breathing. It was the most beautiful music I had ever heard. We were still here. We were still together. And nobody was ever going to separate us again. Sometimes the people you share your blood with are the ones most eager to spill it. I spent 40 years building a fortune to secure my family's future, only to realize I had neglected to build their character. Waking up in that hospital bed paralyzed but hearing everything was the most painful blessing of my life. It taught me that silence is the loudest way to hear the truth. I learned that you cannot buy loyalty and you cannot inherit integrity. By taking everything away from my son, I didn't ruin him. I gave him the only thing I had left to give the opportunity to finally become a man on his own terms. Protect your peace, even if it means waging war on your own kin. If you enjoyed this story of justice and redemption, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Let me know in the comments below, would you have given Julian a second chance, or did Ray make the right call? I read every single comment. See you in the next story.